Britton. Been farming on the Big Island about 20 years. Started this GoFarm program. GoFarm's been around a long time, but started this site in 2020 and agroforestry farm, 20 acres outside of Pahoa. Used to farm up in Waimea as well, and yeah, just do a lot of seeds. Kind of the rest is history from there. We'll just jump right into tractors. So I'll start with a. Does anyone, maybe some of you guys know this old timer, Andy Sarhanas? He was one of the biggest organic ginger growers in East Hawaii in the late 80s and 90s, and he used to tell this. It wasn't really a story, but he wrote an article that got published in the paper a long time ago, but it was I think it got published in Acres magazine. But it was basically if we didn't have any cars or anything, his vision was that we'd have tractors. If there's any tool that we really want on a farm or actually in our lives, like, we want a tractor. And at the same time, on the same side of that coin, like, a lot of where we're trying to get to with our farming is that someday, the way we plant, that the tractor can kind of be retired. Because I'll tell you, as someone who's ran tractors my whole life, it's actually harder on your body than you think. I've known a lot of guys who really put their backs out on tractors and stuff, and yeah, like sitting in a tractor all day it kind of wears you down. So one of the first things I want to share with you guys about tractor safety is when you're on your tractor all day, make sure to stretch when you're done. You know, it really makes a difference. Make sure to take care of yourself. You know, you think, oh, I'm just on the tractor, but like, I know guys who can't even get on the tractor anymore from putting so many hours into the tractor, you know, their lives. So, you know, speaking from my long-term experience with tractors, they're actually pretty hard on your body. You know, it's not a position that we're really, you know, sitting down is not really like a human, you know, position where, like, we either want to be on the ground or we want to be walking. So, you know, I just want to share that with you guys, taking care of yourselves kind of in the long haul. As I like to tell the students, you know, farming's like, it's a marathon sport. It's like ultra marathon, you know. It's like forevermore, you know. It's not just for you, it's for your grandchildren and your great grandkids, like all the way like that. So, you know, take care of yourself that way. I don't want to spend too much time on safety. Because the spectrum of safety is kind of wide for everyone. Some people are like ultra safe when it comes to equipment or how they are on the farm, and other people are kind of like more renegade. So there's a lot of safety videos online. There's a lot of information online of you know, being safe with equipment, and I encourage you guys, if you want to go down that path of, you know, learning a lot of the safety things with the tractor, to do that. I'll talk just briefly that probably the most dangerous thing with the tractors is tipping them, right? As we know, that's where most farmers have lost their lives. Second most dangerous thing is the PTO spinning, right? So
what was the first one?
the tractor's tipping. Yeah, tipping a tractor, which is pretty common on our slopes. You know, we don't live on flat ground. So most of our terrain out here is slopey. So a really common situation that happens with a tractor is approaching the slope improperly. And you add an improper approach to a slope, and then you add a bucket, and then you add the height of the bucket, and maybe you add some weight on the bucket, and your tractor very quickly and very easily will flip over. So that being said, you know, what I would recommend to you all, for those of you who have tractors or don't have tractors and someday are going to get a tractor, let's imagine you have a slope here, okay? If your tractor is like on the slope like this, coming across it this way, and the slope is like this, your tendency is to roll, right, down slope. Now, every moment, like every foot or two you bring your bucket up, that weight gets higher and higher with your bucket, you know, that tendency will increase, correct? So there's this fine line of learning your machine, and that's kind of the best way I could say it, of at what point on the slope do you need to change direction and be going directly up and down the slope, because that's ultimately your safest way to get up and down a slope. And it's pretty impressive to, you know, the steepness that you can go up on a slope with a tractor. And sometimes if it's an extremely steep slope, you can turn your angle a little bit in order to get up. But in all the years I've been driving tractors, I've actually never seen a tractor flip over on its back wheels. That's a pretty uncommon thing, though. When you open up the safety manuals, they'll show pictures of that too. But that's an uncommon thing. But this type of situation is very common, especially on these Hamakua farm sites, from here up to, you know, all the way through Waimea. So, you know, whenever you're working on a slope, keep your bucket extremely low, or take your bucket off. You know, maybe you're someone that has to do a lot of mowing. In the old days, I did more mowing, and you know, a lot of these loader buckets come off very easily with tractors. They're quick attach. You know, not just the loader, but you can take off the whole arm assembly, and you can do that relatively easy and quickly if let's say you have a lot of mowing to do on a slope. But if you have a lot of mowing to do on a slope, I encourage you to invest in a fence and livestock. Because mowing grass gets old quickly. And it's a lot more valuable to convert grass into meat or milk or other types of products that you can consume rather than just burn fuel. So any questions about safety? Yeah.
So, you know, how I think about on the tractor all the time is center of gravity. Where's the center of gravity? Because if the center of gravity's inside your 4 contact points on the ground, you're stable unless it's rocking or something. But
yeah, and that's a really good point, which kind of brings me back to learning your machine. Because as you get on different pieces of equipment, that center of gravity is always going to be a little different. It'll be different depending upon how you set your tractor up. So all tractors have an ability to change the wheel dimensions. This is put on tractors specifically for different row cropping operations mostly, and how big or how wide you want your beds. If you're not like a tractor bed farmer, and let's say you're more an orchard farmer, one thing you can do for safety is you can take your tractor tires, your rear ones, and set them at the farthest distance apart you can, so that your stability on your rear tires is quite a distance. That's not always the case if, let's say, you're a vegetable farmer and you want to make 30-inch beds, and you want to be able to make a 30-inch bed. You guys can see these beds that we just turned in our student plots. What we do is, after we do our spading or tillage, we just drive over the beds with the tractor, and it makes a 30-inch bed. That's because the wheels are set where we want them. If you have an orchard or you know, you don't need to be making 30-inch beds, you can just take your tires off, unbolt the rims, and put those wheels out as far as you can. And that'll really stabilize your tractor for slopes. But yeah, center of gravity, and it's over time as you operate equipment, it's a real feeling thing. So one thing I encourage new tractor owners to do is get a pile. Mulch is great because we all like to use mulch, and start feeling your tractor out. You know, go into the pile, lift it up, feel what it feels like on different slopes, small slopes. You know, don't go out on your steepest slope with a load. You know, lift it up and down, see what it starts to feel like when the center of gravity changes. And it's a real feeling thing. You know, that's why we have good operators and not good operators. So it's something you start to feel as you work your machine over the course of years, ultimately. But those are just some simple tips when it comes to safety. As for you know, the other end of things, getting away from tipping the machine, and we'll kind of talk more about this when we get over to the tractor, is the PTO spinning. Yeah, so that spinning PTO is how many farmers have lost digits and things, arms. So, you know, these are gonna be your brains, you know, knowing when something's spinning to not go near it, or how you're gonna approach it, or if someone's around. You know, a real common thing too is when you're mowing or you're running a flail mower or anything like that, and you know, maybe your neighbor or your child is, you know, within 30 or 40 feet. You guys ever seen a rock come off of a mower? How it can go up to, like, I've seen rocks go up to 80, 90 feet at velocity. So being real mindful of your surroundings is a really important safety factor whenever that PTO is going. You know, obviously a rotary mower is different in what it's going to throw than a spader, you know, that's in the soil, or a tiller, for instance. When you get into like PTO chippers and, you know, different implements, they have a whole spectrum of ranges of danger, right? So those are kind of going to be based on what you guys have, what kind of implements you have. You know, we have a lot to cover, so we'll just move on from safety. Is that good? Everyone feels safe to move on? Okay. So this is what everyone always likes to talk about, horsepower. So yeah, this kind of like falls into how big your farm is and what you're farming. Are you going to be asking yourself questions like, are you going to be doing a lot of loader work? Are you going to be doing a lot of PTO work? Are you going to be opening soil? Are you going to be like pushing material around a lot? And your answers to those questions will kind of guide you on what to buy. And one of the important things, or the myths that is out there, is the horsepower specs that you have on a tractor. So like that tractor is a 3901, so it's 39 horsepower. But on the PTO, it's only 33 horsepower. So one thing that's important with the tractor is when you get the specs on the tractor, you really want to know your PTO horsepower, because if you're running your PTO a lot, that's where you want the bulk of your power. Okay, so oftentimes there's between a 7 to 10 horsepower difference between like that tractor that's called on the book at Kubota, it's called, oh, this is the 39, this is, you know, the 40 horsepower model. But then you got to look down through those specs and go, okay, it's actually only 33 horsepower on the PTO. So that'll kind of navigate you on what kind of implements you can run, right? Because there's like implements will depend on how much horsepower you have. I'm gonna jump right from this PTO horsepower to this hydrostatic versus manual transmission for a moment, because the other thing to note is that based on whether you have a manual transmission, which is kind of the old-fashioned tractors, or a hydrostatic transmission, usually the hydrostatic transmissions are actually they're about 2 horsepower less on the PTOs. Actually, with most of these Kubotas, they're like that. And so just since we're talking about PTO horsepower, I just wanted to mention that. So, you know, a lot of you guys probably have small farms, and, you know, something like this, you know, this 40 horsepower Kubota is probably more than what you'd need. I like this model in particular for this size farm. I have a bigger tractor at home. I've operated bigger tractors and smaller tractors. One thing that's nice about looking, when you look to buy a tractor, most tractor companies will have a chassis that they make for multiple horsepowers. So like this tractor here comes in like a 30, a 35, and a 40. Well, so imagine that 30 horsepower in this chassis, it's only going to have maybe 22 horsepower on the PTO. That's like getting pretty wimpy for like working these heavier clay soils if we're going to be doing soil work and also loader work. So one thing that I like to consider is like, what's the most horsepower I can get for that size chassis, right? I wanted the smaller chassis because this is kind of a small farm and we do like these little 1/16 of an acre plots. Even like the next chassis up in Kubota or John Deere or whatever, the tires all get bigger, so now we're making bigger pathways, the turning radius starts to change, those things start to shift. So something to look at when you're purchasing a tractor is, you know, each model is going to have a different horsepower motor that can go in the same chassis. So, you know, the price changes, you know, you're going to pay for that horsepower. But if you're looking for, okay, I need the most compact tractor I can get, but I want to get the most horsepower in it, you know, those are good questions to ask yourself. And then there's like those smaller tractors that Kubota sells and John Deere's that are like the B series or the BX. Every company has them. And like when you're on a real small scale, those are awesome. I mean, those would be great. They're like little wheelbarrows and you can get all kinds of little implements for them. There's like, I have a big tractor at home and I like dream of having a little tiny one. Just because it'd be so nice to have for so many things. It's like, go get the tractor out. I was like, it's too big, you know. So, you know, one of our graduates from is recently he purchased a small farm up in Papico, and yeah, he's getting like a 50 horse and like a 22 horse, you know, like a garden tractor and then a field tractor.
What is a small farm?
What's that?
What is a small farm?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
How many acres? Or how many acres do you have here for that?
Yeah, so this is like what's like arable here is about 5 acres. Yeah, and so, you know, I would, you know, anything over, I'd say 2 to 3 acres is kind of getting, you know, where it's like those littler model tractors, kind of like the mini tractors, I'll call them. I'd say if you're doing over 2 acres, you'd probably want to start getting into something more of this medium scale, you know. And agriculturally speaking, these are like wimpy, super tiny tractors. But in our scale and like what's brought into Hawaii, because we don't have like mega farms, you know, this is like the standard medium-sized tractors that are brought in. They're really common, as well as the smaller like subcompact tractors, I believe.
You said that was 40 horse?
Yeah, that's about it's a 39 on like the engine spec, and then the PTO is 33. And that's because it's a manual transmission. If it was the hydrostatic transmission, it'd be a 31. So, and every horsepower counts when you start running the PTO and getting bogged down, especially in our tall grass and things like that. So any questions? Horsepower, PTO, what to buy? Yeah.
Well, I would just throw out, to me, hydrostatic, for what I do, because I'm going up and down hills and I'm, you know, doing a lot of different things. Hydrostatic is by far and away, I would not go back to the manual, just because I can creep up on something very slow if I'm like mowing or just adjusting for drilling a post hole or something, just moving the tractor. The hydrostatic, you can just creep along as slow as you want, or just, you know, it's very simple. So to me, it's safer because you don't have the extra collection. You got to get on the brake and, you know, you just let go of the pedal and the tractor stops dead. So
So testimony for hydrostatic. I'm not a hydrostatic guy.
Can you rent tractors anywhere for like a day?
Home Depot, I think, is the only place where you could really rent a tractor, unless you have a contractor's license. Then I think you can rent a tractor. Is that
it would be like a
correct?
Mini backhoe with no implements.
Yeah, you can't rent PTO implements. Yeah, I don't believe so.
Right.
You know anyone that rents tractors?
Well, Kate does Case, because you can rent a dozer or a excavator
With a contractor's license.
Is that-
Yeah.
You have to-
Yeah, you have to have $1 million. You have to have $1 million liability.
Some of them
Yeah.
used to rent them, but people were treating them like bulldozers.
Yeah, no, it was the old days. They rented them. You have to have a $1 million liability and a contractor's license to get anything from Case or Caterpillar too. They, you know, a lot of those guys rent the equipment now. But as far as farm equipment, like if you want renting a tiller, it's like that's not non-existent. And the only rentals that I know of are Home Depot and they're only like the subcompact tractors with the little backhoe on the back, you know. Yeah. But yeah, so let's just jump into, since we started the conversation, hydrostatic versus manual transmission. Does anyone know the difference, what they are, what hydrostatic is? Yeah.
It's automatic, really, isn't it?
It's like an automatic, yeah, it's just got a forward and reverse.
It's easier than automatic, 'cause,
Yeah.
you step on a forward pedal or you step on the reverse pedal.
Yeah.
And the harder you step on it, the faster you go.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
They're great, like a lot of, if you're doing a lot of loader work, they're excellent for a lot of loader work. That's, I think, where the idea really came from that I heard, is that's kind of where the design came from, was kind of from the skid steers, you know, for really fast loader work. So, however, they tend to be, you know, they usually come with a little slightly higher price tag, and you know, for repairs, if your hydrostatic has issues, it's a little more costly repairs than repairing a manual transmission. And then it changes the horsepower on the PTO a little bit. But again, those are like pros and cons, like again, if you're getting a tractor and your intention is to do a lot of loader work, I would say probably you're definitely going to want to get a hydrostatic because you're going back and forth all the time. You don't want to be, shuttling. Like this has a shuttle, they call it. So it's like you have your forward reverse here on your side, but yeah, you got to push the clutch in and hit the brake and all that. But that's how that goes. And with the hydrostatic, for field work, you can lock it in to whatever speed you want and go. 4-wheel drive versus 2-wheel drive. I don't even think I've ever seen a 2-wheel drive tractor come in to Bacon or any of these places anymore. You can find 2-wheel drive tractors. There's, I was for a long time, I just kind of had a cup of coffee and looked at tractors, whatever came up on Craigslist for about 20 years. And so I bought some different county tractors that were 2-wheel drive. Some of these old cases they're really good tractors, 2-wheel drive tractors. If you have really rocky area, like Puna can be a place where if it's really rocky, a 2-wheel drive tractor could, work out a little bit. But as soon as it starts to get wet, you're in trouble. I use my 2-wheel drive tractor. I actually put a lift on it and used it as a cultivating tractor over row crops, and it worked really well like that for a long time. But for the most part, you're going to avoid 2-wheel drive tractors. Also for loader work, they're kind of terrible for loader work because they're just not powerful enough to go into small piles. So you're always going to be looking for 4-wheel drive tractors. Like when you look on the specs and you're like, oh my god, maybe we could get a 2-wheel drive one because it's like $8,000 cheaper. Don't. Just gonna say don't. Yeah, like on these slopes in here, it wouldn't even work. As soon as it gets wet, you'd be stuck. Yeah, instantly. So as far as 2-wheel drive for 4-wheel drive is kind of the only option here in Hawaii. If these 2-wheel drive tractors are really meant for different places in America where it's flat for a long way and they don't get 200 inches of rain a year. So any questions? Hydrostatic, manual transmission, 4-wheel drive, 2-wheel drive. Okay, so common implements. I think probably the most common implement that everyone's going to have in Hawaii is a rotary mower or a brush hog. It's kind of what most people are going to start with, cutting grass, even if you're going to cut your fence line to, fence and then not have to cut grass. Any of you guys have like implements you're interested in, or yeah?
I have a skid steer, and I was thinking about getting a flail mower on front.
Yeah.
But I've had no experience. So anybody have any comment on that?
On flail mowers?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, flail mowers are great. They create a much finer mulch of the grass. So it's excellent for, we use a flail on our walk behind tractor. I use a flail at home on my bigger tractor. Yeah. Having both is wonderful because the flail won't really tackle our big guinea grass and our Napier grass when it's really tall.
Oh really?
Yeah, it doesn't.
I cut it all the time.
With what horsepower?
Well, 35 PTO.
Slowly, very slowly.
Yeah, well, when it does get real big, you have to take 2 swipes because it'll clog it up.
Yeah, it'll take it.
Yeah. I'll grind.
It
sounds like a stump grinder because it is. It's a stump.
Yeah.
I mean, the stump of guinea grass.
Yeah.
But it'll grind. It'll grind it down.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is. It is less of a. Well, it does. I mow lawn too. I mean, it'll mow. Just about look like a lawnmower.
Yeah, it depends on what knives you put on them. So if you're using, if you're really wanting to get a flail mower and tackle bigger stuff, they have a hammer knife for them, so you can put on a hammer, like these hammer chains, rather than the knife chains. So that'll change how you take it down and how many passes you make. Flails are usually double the price of a rotary mower. They're about double in cost. One of the benefits of a flail is the size it takes up though too on the rear. So like a rotary mower takes up a lot more space on your rear implement, so your tractor becomes longer. So the flail is more rectangular rather than kind of square like.
A skid steer would have to go in front.
Yeah, it has to go in front.
About just the debris and everything.
Yeah, you'd want to, if I had something like that, usually guys put a cage on the front when they're operating, stuff like that. Yeah, Sean?
If you rent those at Cat, you want to try it out first.
You can rent a flail mower.
At Cat, Hawthorne Cat, they might have to ship it from Oahu, but it's quality.
Just the mower.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
That's all I see.
Cool.
I'll give him a call. That's it.
Yeah, so, mowing is,
Blades that
what's
you
that?
put on. There's different blades. Is that what you're?
well, they're not really blades, they're called knives, and there's like really kind of, there's a multitude of types, but the two types you have are like a finishing one, which is like a knife, and then you have a hammer one, which is, used for like threshing even. They like, and buddy of mine uses his, he actually like has a chute and, he just uses a small one, like a 4-foot one with an 80 horsepower Heston, and then he cuts, he has like drags behind a giant dump trailer and just makes a ridiculous amount of mulch.
Blade or a knife would be least likely to get destroyed over the course of time.
I mean, it depends, like what you're going to be using it for over the course of time. I mean, if you're only going to be doing big stuff, then I'd get the heaviest duty hammer knives. But if you're going to be doing big stuff, but then also you're cutting your lawn, then you want to just use the, just the knives. Yeah.
So I have it's 1.95 meters wide, whatever. It's like almost 7 feet.
7 feet.
But it's got cast iron hammers
Uh-huh.
that are 2 pounds, 2.5 pounds.
Yeah,
each
it's
or
good. You got
something.
hammers. Yeah.
And it's amazing. I have some of them are curled.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there's a
and
whole.
They still cut. They cut no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even grass when they're. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty good. And,
Yeah.
and I think I've ground, 2-inch 5E and.
Yeah. Yeah, but the hammers they're awesome.
Yeah, it'll grind up. So
Yeah.
they, go slow, but
Yeah.
it doesn't go as fast as a rotary,
Yeah.
but it will, it'll grind stuff into nice mulch.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, if you have the funds and want the diversity, then the flail is probably the number one mowing choice. And then, like I said, for that's a 60-inch mower. I think these 60-inch mowers, rotary mowers, are probably like 3 or 4 G's from Bacon now. And the flails are like, that's going to be about double that. Yeah. You're looking 7 to 8. You can find old county flail mowers though. That's where I got mine. So they sometimes come available. You just have to be a Craigslist hound. And those old county ones are good ones. They're like the old Alamos. So they're good. They're good heavy duty ones. Yeah. The common implements, you're gonna need to mow grass, and then now you kind of start to ask yourself, what are the things you're doing on your farm? Are you row cropping? Like, do you need a tillage tool? Are you doing agroforestry? Do you need to get a chipper? If you're also like, are you gonna be, if you're gonna be farming a lot, maybe you want a ripper, to open up our compacted soils. Maybe you mix a lot of cement. You can get cement mixers. Yeah.
backhoe attachments.
So
Yeah.
I guess what I'm most curious about is when I need to plow, spade, and till. And if you need to spade before you till, or are you able to just till to make crop rows? Or do you need to break it up first?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, like a spader will really leave a pretty finished bed. Like everything was just spaded. Yeah, I don't till after I spade. It depends on what kind of crop you're putting in, but and it depends how rough the landscape was when you started. So like I ripped, like when we first started the farm here, I ripped everything. But now that everything's been ripped, the spader kind of takes care of it one time.
And you ripped it with like a plow? Or
I ripped it with, the ripper's not here, we just shipped it to Maui because we're starting the new farm over there. It's just basically, a ripper is just like, depending upon the size of the tractor, it's just like a tooth about, you know, maybe 2 feet, and it just goes on a simple A-frame bar attachment. They're pretty inexpensive implements because they're not run on any kind of PTO. Any implement that doesn't run on a PTO is going to be significantly less. You know, like gearbox. That's why, like traditionally, like old-fashioned, like the moldboard plow, right? The moldboard plow is a really, you know, inverting the soil. If you want to invert the soil, that was kind of given to us. I don't really use the plow. I only use the plow here to put the water lines in. Just took off one of the shares and used it for making the water lines. But I'd say like probably one of the better minimal till tools that's affordable is the disc. You know, the disc is, you know, if you rip and disc, it's like you can get a pretty good bed quick, and then you can use a walk behind tractor. If you disc enough, you can almost create a planting bed if you don't want to till. You know, our soils here, their tendency to hard pan with tillage is almost instantaneous when you start running the tiller around. You know, they'll still perform, but you'll get that hard pan. But if you rip and disc or rip and spade, but again, like a disc is like a fraction of the cost of a spader, you know, like a fraction, you know, probably like 1/8 of the cost, I would guess. And the spaders are all coming from Europe now. I was having a hard time trying to get one I got turned down trying to even get one for the new Maui site. I gave up. Yeah, Bacon was like, yeah, we don't do it anymore. I'm like, why not? So, but yeah, like starting off, Sean, like ripping is a good thing to do. But if you don't have a ripper, like I'd say your basic tool, you know, if you could try to get a disc, you know, it's affordable, and then disc and then a tiller, you know, and then you can kind of make beds from there.
It's just different consistency, like it breaks it down finer. The tiller would be the most fine.
Yeah, the tiller's the most fine, you know, probably even more fine than the spader, but the spader's impressive. It makes it pretty fine. I mean, you can walk in the fields right now and see what's out there. But the difference of the spader is the way it articulates is it doesn't create the hard pan, right? So it's more of a shoveling effect than a spinning effect this way. So you don't get that you know, that hard pan that's instantly created. Does everyone know what I'm talking about with the tiller when it creates hard pan? Okay, yeah.
Well, no, the spade. I'm not familiar with the spader.
It's right here.
But,
Yeah. Yeah. So it's these shovels. It works off of two. It's like has two different articulating points rather than just one. Okay. So a tiller just spins like this, yeah, and it just has the, you know, kind of these shovels that spin at high speed and just kind of pulverize the soil and leave it flat. So when a tiller, here's your surface. Here's your surface of the soil, okay, and here's the depth of your tiller. When that tiller goes in the ground, it's just spinning like this over one surface. So what happens is you do it enough times in a season, and with these clay-like soils, especially with what's below our soil, that top 6 inches of the soil horizon, this just turns into cement, right? And you guys have probably all seen it in your fields and things like that, and the plants stop growing. So the way a spader works is the spader has these articulating shovels that shovel down, and they work in this direction. It kind of pushes the machine forward like this. It's a European tool. It's been around a long time. It's kind of all they use in Europe. They bring them in. There's a company in Pennsylvania that brings them in. There's 2 different companies. There's Selly makes them, and then these ones here are made by a company called Falk. That's this one here. And they make small ones too, even for like small. This is kind of maxed out for this tractor. It's actually mine for my bigger tractor, but I use it here. But yeah, I'd never go back to a tiller after using a spader. It's like it's kind of much better for the soil. However, if you can't get a spader, and you don't want to use a tiller, then your better options are to disc and then power harrow. If you really want to be like the no-till game or minimal tillage, that's kind of like the avenue that the minimal till guys kind of run, is like, you know, you rip maybe the first year, and then, you know, eventually you kind of retire your ripper because you don't want to even disturb the subsurface of the soil. But like, you know, you got to remember that like this landscape, right? They took a D9 and a D9 and an anchor chain, and they just kind of dragged it across the whole landscape. So our compaction is massive, you know, it's massive. So, you know, those first initial rippings just kind of like, you know, opening up that deeper subsoil to kind of unlock that hard pan. And then you can come in with your disc, and then disking, you know, setting your disc so you're just working. The disc is nice because it's not ever going to create hard pan. You're not like actually turning underneath. You're just kind of chopping that top surface of the soil. And then the next tool you follow that with to make a finer seed bed is some sort of harrow, or like you can, guys now they'll set like chisel plows. You use a chisel plow. And again, these are inexpensive tools. Like when you look at, you know, if you wanted to, like, I'm just gonna write these things down, but we have like ripper, you know, this is like initial. I can't even spell right now. But that's like your first step, maybe the first 2 years. And then and you're doing it like maybe after a season, like after you've done a cover crop, mow your cover crop down, maybe rip it one more time, you know, maybe not, you know, like you're just gonna have to look at your soil conditions and what's been there and your slope, and then you're gonna disc, and then you're gonna harrow. And a disc and a harrow, like, again, these are tools that don't have a PTO attachment, so they're much less expensive. I mean, you can almost like build a disc. You can almost buy a disc. It's just box tubing. Yeah. You know, it's pretty basic with an A-frame that attaches to your tractor. Yeah, like cultivating toolbars. You know, like you look on it's like, oh, $2,000. You can hire a welder here in the steel. You probably build it for $1,000. You know, I've done that. You know, with equipment in the past. You know, and then if you're doing like row cropping like we are here, and then, you know, maybe invest in a small walk behind, you know, tractor if you're doing market garden kind of stuff. But on bigger scale, these are kind of like less expensive tools. You could probably get a ripper, a disc, and a harrow for the cost of one spader. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? Going down the rabbit hole?
Why isn't there like somebody who has a business that has all that shit and comes to your place once or twice or 3 times a year? Why?
Well, it's so, you know, the thing is, it's so specific about what your needs would be, you know, like when do you need it? Like when you need the tool, you need the tool. Like when it's time to disc, like that's on your planting season. So I know like there's these guys, what's the orchard guys here? What they're called, Ag Solutions or something, but they do like, I think there's more of that for orchard farmers, that like there's some orchard guys that have mowers come and stuff like that. But for market growers, when you get into that, it's really difficult to have someone come prep your soil how you want it too, you know. It's like, oh, just build me beds, and it's like bringing up all this equipment is like, that's a whole thing, you know. You have I don't know, you want to start a business?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
In your spare time, Brett?
If you want a spader and you're on a slope, what's the minimal horsepower for your PTO that you'd recommend? Do you have to have
there's
40?
different spaders for different PTOs. I mean, they make these spaders that are as wide as this building, you know, for a 250 horsepower machine. And then they, like this one's actually a little too big for, this is more like a 50 to 80 horsepower size. And then they make like the mini ones, they call it like the Panda or something. And that's like, it goes down to like, you can put these on a little 25 horsepower tractor. You know, if you can get them from Europe, you know, probably ship them through Canada or something, because I don't know why Bacon won't bring them in anymore. But there's a company called the Market Gardener. I think they're called the Market Gardener. They're out of Pennsylvania, and they're bringing in the Selly ones. So you might be able to get them through there if you're really interested in getting a spader.
China doesn't make them.
I don't know. I wouldn't want a spader from China. Yeah, just because of how much they articulate. Yeah, but
they'll ship anything.
yeah, they could probably get one. Yeah. So another common implement I think people get around here is like a post hole digger or an auger. Again, that's something that's only like north of the river, not south. So, you know, if you're north of the river, then that might be something that works for you. And if you're south, then you just grab a bar or a jackhammer.
Or a backhoe attachment. Which really,
Oh yeah, a backhoe attachment. So that's another common attachment. Again, it's on the more expensive scale of attachments. But if you're like putting in an orchard, you know, you could definitely pay for that. And especially up here in these, you know, backhoe attachment. If you're putting an orchard in up here, would probably be a great attachment to have for putting in trees. You know, a common mistake that I see in people putting in trees up here, again, getting back to that hard pan, is just digging too small of a hole. And the tree looks great for the first year.
Yep.
And then it hits cement.
Yep.
Yeah. So dig a big hole.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the most common thing I see. Oh, look at my tree, it's so nice. Yeah, next year it's not. Yeah.
So I have a post hole digger and a backhoe. The post hole digger, the problem is you hit a rock, you hit a big rock,
Yeah.
which you'll shear the shear pin,
Yeah.
and then your auger's stuck,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, then you're stuck.
yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of the O bar. I grew up in Pennsylvania. We dug a lot of holes, and I've dug all my holes in my farm.
Something.
Yeah, I'm not 60 something. I've used the augers too, you know, and I've ran into those issues with the auger, and then you're cursing the auger, and you're like, oh man, I got a shear pin, put another shear pin in, doesn't matter, you know, and they take a good bit of horsepower. I've had them, I've sold them, I've gotten rid of augers, you know, and someone tried to give me an auger one time, I'm like, no, I don't want it. Take the bar. I got boys. I got strong boys. Any other implements you guys want to discuss? Yeah? Forks. Okay, that's a good one. Tractor forks are super handy. There's pretty much two avenues for tractor forks. There's ones where your bucket comes off, and these, like a lot of these new tractors have these like quick attach buckets, and you have to buy a fork assembly, which is the nicest way to go. It's where you can use you can maximize the strength of your tractor by removing your bucket and putting on the pallet forks that you would have to purchase separate. Another option that you can do is they have these clamp-on style forks that you leave the bucket on and they kind of slide onto your bucket and clamp them on. Those work well, but again, you can't really max out the strength of your tractor that way. I have the clamp-on ones, and they're handy for me in the sense of like when I have to like just lift something here or there. And if you're not going the fork direction, then nothing like the old-fashioned chain. Yeah, we did everything with chains for a long time. But yeah, tractor forks, if you can, if you're interested in them, affording them. One of the challenges I've seen with people putting tractor forks on is suddenly you feel like you're a logger. And you do this one, that you start thinking your tractor's a bulldozer. And that's a really common mistake that people beat up their tractors, especially in the front bearings. With the four-wheel drive tractors, it really works your front bearings. So you'll start like lifting up logs that are too big, and you know, pushing things that are too big, even if you don't have forks and you're pushing with the bucket. So be real, you know, there's a lot of bulldozers out there, and just hire one when you need one. Don't try to use your tractor as a bulldozer. I've seen tractors die in Hawaii from that, or not so much die, but you have to do major rebuilds, mostly on the front end. Is there anything you want to add to the forks?
Well, we put everything on pallets.
Okay.
And that way,
Yeah.
like, because we have a nursery also.
Yeah, perfect.
So moving nursery plants and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, rather than a two-wheel dolly and one
Oh,
plant
yeah,
at a time,
yeah.
you put 8 or 12 potted plants on a pallet, pick them up and move them over here.
Or when you buy something, you have them loaded.
Yeah, loading it up. Yeah,
Not
yeah,
your truck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
get lumber, you can unload it with just
yeah,
free pallets everywhere. So
yeah.
when
Pallets
they
are
run
available.
out, you
Yeah.
throw those in a pile.
So again, it's so operation specific, you know. Like it's so tractors. That's the thing about all the implements and things is like, yeah, if you're a nurseryman and you know you're moving plants around, that's a no-brainer to spend whatever it's going to cost to have your fork assembly. That's a number one tool. You're probably gonna have your forks on there more than your loader. You know, that's really what you want more than your loader bucket. So again, asking yourself those kind of questions on which direction your farm's navigating. You had a question, Sean?
I was just gonna say, just wanted to bring it up. If you had no implements, what are the risks and benefits then, as far as not having weight on the back, having too much weight on the front?
Yeah, generally, like if you have no implements, then you know you want to like get a box. You know, they'll have like you can buy a box or you could make a box, something to put some weight back there, or fill your tires with water and really try to get some weight in your tires. Speaking of boxes, I will say that probably one of the best implements you can get for a tractor that again is back to a simple implement is a box scraper. All of us have roads to maintain on our farms. It's probably one of the most expensive things that we have to maintain on our farms, and a box scraper does that. You can really get a lot done, and it's a simple tool to have on the back of your tractor that does have weight. Like if you're in a pinch, you're like, oh yeah, I can really only afford the tractor. What can I buy with it? Probably the first thing you buy with it would be a mower if you got to mow grass. But if you're like, hey, I don't need to mow grass. I have animals. I have this and that. But man, I have a 800-foot long driveway that you know I got to maintain. A box scraper is an excellent way to do that. And it's a weighty implement, and it's not very. They tend not to be too expensive because again, it doesn't have a PTO on it, right? Yes.
I used a rear auger.
Uh-huh.
Because it's wet.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's clay.
It's clay. Yeah.
So, what's your thoughts on the front end auger?
The front end auger?
Yeah, but because I actually, with my tractor, I bought that, what is it, that hydraulic where you can open and close it. It has not only the downward pressure, it has the turning. So have you had any experience with the front end? So it's almost, I think, comparable to
It's like the setup that they put on the skid steers and stuff. Yeah, I mean, if it's got an extra hose, then it's going to have that much more power going to it, you know? I mean, I know those guys doing all the fences, that's how they drill their holes. They drill them with that equipment. They're not going out there with tractors.
Skid steer. So my question is, the skid steer has more horsepower and more torque.
You have a big tractor, yeah?
It's only 52.
Yeah, but 52 with those front hoses, I would research it. I can't say I have experience in it, but I would guess that you'd have more power. You got to figure out, do you have more power in those hydraulic lines coming out or in your PTO? You know, that's really the math you're going to figure out. And if you have more torque because it's sending it sideways, but I'm not certain. And then you have to ask yourself what the cost of that equipment for how many holes you got to drill, you know? Is it better to just call the Brada up and say, hey, bring the skid steer over and drill these holes for me? Or you need to buy an equipment just to drill those holes. How many holes you got to drill, right? You know, that's the other thing to think about with buying implements and equipment. Is it short term, or am I going to use this implement for like my whole farm life, you know? And if it's short term, it's like sometimes it's better to hire it out. Or if it's like equipment, be like, oh, I know I can resell this equipment, you know? I'm going to use it for a few years and then I'm going to unload it and it's not going to lose its value. Equipment doesn't really lose its value out here, you know?
My problem is for the auger, I don't know if you call it horsepower or torque, hard to go down because it doesn't have that pressure down as opposed to the front end. And then because now you got clay because you dug
getting it back up.
Getting back up.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking, would it be feasible to get the front?
I think it would be research. I think you'd have to research it, but I think it could be feasible. But I can't give a definite yes or no on that. I don't want to tell you to buy a $10,000 auger.
People rent stuff with the skid steer.
Yeah. But I mean, I think you probably have more power getting up. You know, I mean, I don't know though. Like those 3-point arms, like the amount of power that they have to come up, like it's significant for a 52 horsepower machine. Like I don't know how much more power your loader has coming up than the rear implement. Like those rear implements, man, they can lift some weight, you know, especially on a 50 horse machine. Like I know my 50 horse, like my 3-point linkage probably can lift more than my loader. You know, I mean, it's impressive what that thing can lift, you know. So just yeah, I would do some research, and then again, ask yourself how many holes you got to drill. And you know, for $10,000, you could drill a lot of holes to have someone come drill your holes. You know, and those guys go fast, you know, these days.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. One common thing, just since we're still on implements, is the chippers, the PTO wood chippers. We GoFarm recently got one, and I hadn't had one for, always wanted one, never got one. But yeah, I'm impressed with it. I think we had only got the Land Pride one out of Kubota. They had it in stock, but there's a really good one called, I think it's Bearcat makes it, a PTO dribber. It's called called like Bear Max or something, but it's like a hydraulic feed one that goes onto the tractors. Bear Max or Bear something. GoFarm couldn't get it because we couldn't open a PO with their company or something, but we had to settle for the Land Pride one, but that was still really impressive. The main thing with any chippers is the tendency, again, is like using your tractor as a bulldozer, is thinking your wood chipper is like bigger than it is. So, you know, small stuff is great. And if you're putting in these agroforests, you know, everyone's hot on agroforestry, you know, putting in these common NFTs, you know, Veracidia, Caliandra, these plants, you can really harvest and chip them. The time to be doing your coppicing is at that, you know, 1 inch to, you know, 2.5, 3 inches, they're prime, and they're just going to go through like butter. So when you're doing these NFTs, if you invest in a chipper, I think it'll pay back, especially if you're doing your NFTs right next to your crops, which is commonly what we're doing, you know, using them as hedgerows, windbreaks, fixing nitrogen. And then you can come along, depending upon the time of year you want to do it, and chip, and then just chip right in place, you know, chop and drop, but again, you're just kind of speeding up the process. That's kind of what chips do. Tires, so there's two most common tires, is the Ag 1 and I think the Ag 4 they call it, and like those ones are considered the Ag 1, the more aggressive style. And then they have the ones that are like a little more square type, and those I believe are called Ag 4 and or R4. I think it's R1 and R4 actually. R1 and R4. And they recently came out with a hybrid of them. My buddy just got one, got a brand new Kubota and got the hybrid ones because he just like wanted the hybrid ones. So it's like a hybrid between the R1 and the R4. The R4 ones are the ones you commonly see on the skid steers and stuff. They're more of like a, they kind of go like that. The R1s are like this kind of tread, right? And the R4s are like, they're a little more squared up like that. Is everyone following me? So for most farmers, if you're in, you know, 90% of the time, you're going to want to go with the Ag 1, the more aggressive, you know, tires for in the fields and stuff. A lot of nurserymen choose the R4s because you're more like, you're actually going to save fuel when you're on, you know, more gravelly terrain with the R4s, and you're not going to burn up the tires are going to last longer on like harder terrain. Any tire questions? And then, like I said, there's a hybrid now. I don't even know what it's called, but you can order them when you buy a new tractor. It's a cross between the R1 and R4, and they're pretty cool looking. But I was teasing my friend about it, but yeah.
I think they're calling them like the industrial.
Yeah, they're called like the industrial something. And I was like, oh, cool name. Yeah. Question? Or?
So I've got a John Deere 3720, which is like a 42 horse.
Yeah.
Which it's not 37 horse, which I don't know why John Deere doesn't follow everybody else's.
I don't know where they come up with all the numbers. Yeah.
But the front tires are tiny compared to my case, which has got massive tires and, you know. And I've peeled them off the rim, doing loader work and, you know, making a hard turn.
With weight on them, with weight in the front.
Weight,
yeah, you can peel them right off.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. I'm just gonna hold that thought, just because you're saying it. When you guys have weight in the tractor bucket, and when I mean like weight, like let's say you have a full load of gravel. Gravel's something that's very heavy, and our gravel is exceptionally heavy. And when you start turning, right, all that pressure is going on those front tires. And like this gentleman's saying, you can actually peel the tire off the rim. Old farmer buddy of mine, RNG, I think they still do it, is you can fill your tires with foam. Yeah, and that's what he did to avoid that problem forevermore. It's really expensive. I think they only do it like every few months, but you guys can go and that's another good point, is RNG tire is the place when it comes to tractor tire repair, tractor tire, when you need like a new tube. You know, you'll be real local when you say, hey, I just need new tube, not slipper, right? The slipper's the tire, yeah, just so you know what you're talking about. So you don't need a slipper, you just need the tube. But if you don't want to replace those tubes, and again, I don't know if they still do it, but they actually, they used to do it, is you can take your ag tires in and they'll basically insert them on the rim with foam, and you're like forever never flat. Yeah, so it's kind of, check it out if you're a tractor person. But as far as maintenance and repair of tractor tires and the place to get tractor tires, that's the place, RNG, right there in Hilo. And usually if they don't have it in Hilo, they'll either have it in Kona or Oahu. And I always, like, if I have to buy tubes, I always try to buy at least two. They've gotten more. They're like, the price goes up every single time for tractor tubes. So just a little bit of advice as far as getting tubes. And it's always nice too if you get a flat and like they don't have a tube. It's really awesome if you're the guy who like rolls in like, I got my own tube, you know, because I was like thinking ahead. You know, you gotta think ahead, because again, it's like they don't have a tube, and then you're in the middle of work. And it's like, when you need your tractor, you need your tractor, and now you could be down for 3 days just because it's no tube, you know. And it's like, it's one thing like in mechanical, but it's like when it's just a tube, that's really frustrating when you can't get into a field, do some field work from a tube. So, so that's my little tire spiel. Let's just jump into any questions? Like wearing you guys down? Okay. Want to just talk for a minute about the PTO and the drive shafts. So, and we're gonna, like, once we get through kind of this list, we're almost there. We're gonna go over to the tractor and we'll just kind of do some on-hand stuff, and we'll kind of talk about these things again. But the PTO drive shafts, mostly there's two different drive shafts. The way they come is a slip clutch and a shear pin. There was a mention of shear pin. That's a lot how the augers are with the shear pin, and a shear pin is hence shears off when it hits a rock or jams, and it's really frustrating with shear pins. So whenever you can, you get a slip clutch on your drive shaft. So most rotary mowers now don't even come with shear pins. That's kind of how they were in the old days. Like, you had to ask for a slip clutch or a shear pin, but most things are all coming with a slip clutch now. That being said, if you go over to like Tractor Supply and want to get like the most hokey equipment you can get, it'll have a shear pin and not a slip clutch, and you'll just replacing shear pins all the time, and it's really frustrating because right out of that gearbox there's just one pin. So you hit a rock or something, that pin is meant to shear off. It's not like a grade 8 bolt or anything, rather than a clutch meaning to take that force. So that's kind of like your understanding of drive shafts. Those are the two things to understand, you know. Like, you might be asked that, like, oh, do you want the shear pin or the slip clutch? And the slip clutch might be $600, $700, $800 more. You want the slip clutch. And one thing to note about the drive shafts, you know, they're two pieces. They come apart, right? One part connects to the tractor, one part connects to the gearbox, or whatever you're running, whether it's a rotary mower, a flail mower, sky's the limit. You know, whatever you're running, a cement mixer, a wood chipper. You know, you have one side is the tractor, one side's so it's a shaft, yeah. And on that shaft, there's different ways the shaft is, and I've seen people have trouble putting the shafts together, but the shaft always has one flat edge. So just look for that, and that'll help guide you. There's a way to line them up. You know, they're usually not just a one triangle. And there's different types of drive shafts. You know, this is like a basic one, a triangle. They make like I've seen old equipment, square kind things and stuff, but commonly 99% of the drive shafts you'll get on whatever implement you buy. When you buy an implement, it comes with the shaft. So each implement you have will have its own drive shaft. Okay, because there'll be different lengths depending upon what the implement is. So like that drive shaft that's on a rotary mower is longer than one that would be on a flail mower, or like a spader here. It's a shorter shaft because the gearbox is closer to the tractor. So that shaft, oftentimes, if you get new equipment, you know, and you buy it, I encourage you to watch a YouTube video on how to cut a shaft, because you might have to cut your shaft specific to your tractor. And if you have more than one tractor, then try to cut it to fit both, because that can happen too. And you cut it and it only fits one, and you're like, damn. Yeah.
And keep the shaft greased so that when you need to
Yes.
off, you're not fighting it.
Yeah, so a good example of you know, keeping the shaft greased. Pass part of a shaft around, but this is a good example. I'll pass this around, but you guys can see it's got this one flat edge on it. Okay, and this is like a homemade shaft. I don't even know where it came from, but it works well with this spader. Came off a different machine. But yeah, like gentleman here saying, is you want to keep it greased because that shaft is meant to move. You know, that's how you're getting it on and off the tractor. And I'll show you guys that. You know, what we did last year in the tractor workshop is we'll kind of just like hook up an implement and show you kind of tricks and things like that. Yeah.
Speaking about grease, how often, after how many hours do you...
We'll get to maintenance
Oh.
down there. Yeah. We're getting there. Close. But yeah, it's a great question. Any questions? Drive shafts, slip clutch, shear pin? And you'll probably maybe think of questions.
Amazon sells like boxes of shear pins.
Yeah.
It looks cool.
Hate those things. The
Tractor
shear-
Supply sells them like in a 5-pack.
Oh yeah, because you just keep them in your tractor, and then so yeah. I mean, try to avoid using any implement with a shear pin unless that's all it comes in, you know, and then you're gonna need it, and that's how that goes.
And don't
Yeah.
replace it with a grade 8 bolt.
Yeah, and don't replace it. That's the other thing, is if you have a shear pin attachment, you got to only use that shear pin. If you try to go, I'm going to use a grade 8 bolt, I'm going to use a heavier duty bolt, now you're going to break your gearbox. And then you're going to have a much more expensive repair.
A certain grade bolt, that's all it really is.
Yeah, the shear pin is basically like the wimpiest bolt you can buy,
Right.
you know? Yeah. But I've done it. I've like put a grade 8 bolt on there and gotten it's just done. I'm just doing it. But yeah. Shoot for the slip clutch. Linkage.
Oh,
Yeah.
one thing about slip clutches, you have to don't let them freeze up.
Yeah. So their slip clutch is like I don't want to go down too much into the slip clutch, but again, you can watch YouTube videos. You guys can research them. But yeah, slip clutch will freeze up if you're not using an implement for a long time. Always try to keep your equipment covered in Hawaii. Like always, like just really get your equipment under cover. If not, tarp it. The equipment does not like to be out here in Hawaii. These gearboxes and these drive shafts in particular, they really don't like the weather. The U-joints, there's a lot of moving parts with the drive shaft. A bad drive shaft really creates a bad day on the farm. On all kinds of ways, even just setting it up, like, oh, I'm gonna go set up my whatever's been sitting out, and all of a sudden your drive shaft's frozen, and like what was gonna take 5 minutes, now you're like making a run to Ace and Home Depot, and you're renting a jackhammer to get the thing free, like that. Like I've had to cut drive shafts to free them up.
So it's better to run the tractor then instead of let it sit.
Yeah, better to run them if you get them. Yeah, let it. Put it to work once you get it. Put some hours on it. Yeah. Linkage. So when I refer to linkage, I'm referring to the 3-point linkage. So you have 3 key points on the tractor. For our purposes, we're mostly talking about these kind of 40 horsepower tractors, which is going to be a category 1, they call it. They also have category 2 and category 3 as you bump up in size and tractor. So right around that 50 horsepower range, like you might have category 2 linkage in the back. The size of, I'm going to pass these around, but these two that I'm passing around first this is category 1, which is, you know, these common ones. And recently over the last years, they've made these little pins smaller. I don't know why, but they're smaller now.
Cheaper.
Yeah, cheaper. I mean, I guess. I'm
You can
like,
make
and
more
it's like
little
just
pins.
this little pin here. I'm like, kind of wimpy. But this is category 1. I'll point it out when we go over there. And this is category 2. If you have a category 2 tractor and you need to and you only have category, like say you're putting on a category 1 implement, they actually make little couplings that you can slide in there to beef out to match your linkage coming out. Some tractors even you can flip the lower linkages to change it as well, which is kind of nifty. But this is category 1, category 2 for the arm linkages. For the upper link, it's almost always the same, and that's it's a different size. So a common thing is like you'll just mix up your linkages and be like, oh, this one is kind of wobbly, and then you'll just run it. So it's probably your top link, okay? So a top link is smaller. So I'm gonna pass this around with it so you guys can see that difference. And I'll point it out when we're over there as well. Super good to have spare linkages on your farm at all times. Pins, maybe a couple extra links, because yeah, they fall off. I just saw the tractor today and one of the pins was out. So I wasn't the last to use it, but
who sells pins? Because Tractor
Bacon.
Supply does not.
Bacon's the
Went to
place
Tractor Supply and they didn't even know what I was talking
They didn't know what you're talking about? Yeah. Bacon is the place where I've always gotten pins. Case will sell them too. Yeah. Bacon's a little more convenient. Bacon's nice because it's actually, you can go, it's on the floor. So you can kind of pick your linkages. Like Case is all in the back, and then they're like, oh, what do you want? We can't go back there. I'm like, well, I want to go back there, you know?
Yeah.
I want to look at what I want.
Yeah.
But yeah, Bacon, it's right on the floor, and they have a whole wall. You know, everything you want. They have the coupling, so Bacon's the spot to get that. It's one of the only things that I think is affordable in the store. Yeah, I'm always impressed. I'm like, really, you guys charge me all that for all that other stuff, and like this big old piece of steel's $3? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's the spot for linkages and for extra pins. Yep, right there on the floor. Good question. Just briefly on the loader, I know we talked a little bit about the safety of the loader. I just wanted to touch about, you know, when you get a tractor, practice, you know, like get some chips, get a load of gravel. Like if you got a tractor, you're gonna use it, but don't like go do the most important thing you want to do the first time you're on it, because you'll probably mess it up. Not just the tractor, but what you were trying to do. You know, it takes a long time to get comfortable with a loader. You know, and one of the most important things learning with the loader is where the level is. You know, like what is a level bucket to the grade you're on, okay? And that's, you know, it takes eyeing it and feeling it. So the best way you can learn that is with a pile of mulch. Mulch is kind of the best because it's light, you know, so get a pile of mulch, get something light and go into it. You know, that's how I trained my kids with tractors. You know, it's just like go into it, lift it up, dump it out, go into it again. Don't scrape up soil, you know. Learn that level plane of your bucket, right? Don't go in high to the pile. You know, you want to start down low and come in straight. So, and also feeling like maxing it out, like coming into a pile and then lifting up as you come in and turning it. You're doing multiple things as you go into the pile, right? You're like lifting, turning, and then you're even like reversing quickly, like when you get good. So just want to say that briefly about, you know, practicing with your tractor before you like go like decide I'm gonna change the foundation of my house now, you know, and then you're like bumping into things that you don't want to bump into. And then maintenance. So yeah, going back to maintenance. Yeah, I think like generally to answer your question now that we're down there, I think like most companies say it like every 10 hours. grease all the zerks. That's kind of like this. I think there's a sticker on the tractor that says every 10 hours. Yes.
Cheap.
Yeah, it's cheaper to zerk them than it is to not. Yeah, that's a good point.
What I was told.
Yeah, and then I always just, follow your specs in your, the owner's manual of when to change your oils. Usually if you buy a tractor new, you're going to have to change the tractor oil after like 50 hours. That's probably one of your most important oil changes you're going to make, I believe the tranny oil is like the first time is 200 hours on most machines, and then after that it's like 400. But again, look in your manual. John Deere might be a little different than Kubota and stuff like that. But yeah, as far as zerking, doing your grease nipples, get familiar with those grease nipples, and every 10 hours grease them up. It's it's really important. As well as like your drive shaft, or usually have a zerk on it at the U-joint. You probably was passing that drive shaft around. Does everyone know what I'm talking about when I say a zerk? It's not just like there's this little grease nipple. Whenever I do a grease nip, whenever I'm doing greasing, I always take a rag and I always clean the zerk first. Sometimes if I'm feeling like real particular, I'll get a little awl, like a little punch, and I'll just like punch the zerk, the tip of the zerk first to free it up, so I'm not even wasting grease. And because they'll freeze up, those little zerks, and then you start pumping and it's like just spilling all over, and you're like, what am I doing? So you can just take a little awl and just punch on that front part and clean it.
So the zerk is actually a check valve. There's a little ball bearing and a spring.
Yeah.
And so what you're seeing is the top of the ball bearing.
That little ball right there.
Yeah.
And sometimes it freezes up.
Yeah.
So you can just push it with a little awl. Does everyone know what I mean when I say awl? I rep. Not like y'all. Okay. Any questions before we? Yeah.
If you're gonna buy a used tractor, what are some things to look for maintenance wise?
That's a good question. Yeah, I've never bought a new tractor except GoFarm's here. Always bought used tractors. I'd look for hours. How many hours does it have on it? And if it's a good tractor, some of these older tractors, I mean, they have pushed 10,000 hours like no problem. Good question is if it has ever been set, if the clutch was ever done on it. So usually around 2,000 to 3,000 hours. A lot of tractors, you got to separate them and do the clutch. So you want to know if that was done. You're not going to find a lot of tractors out here with 10,000 hours on them that are still alive, guaranteed. I've never seen one. Most will have less hours than that, but that's something you want to ask if the tractor has the clutch was done, because that's a big job on a tractor. You have to take the tractor in 2 parts. It's pretty doable, but it's like you gotta know what you're doing. Obviously, look for rust. What kind of shape is it in? Usually the chassis will be in good shape, but sometimes like the seat, like the whole cab area can be kind of wrecked. And that can be, you got to ask yourself, do I want to repair that or not? So the tractor I have now, I actually bought it in Maui about a decade ago. Like I said, I was looking on Craigslist for a decade before that and buying tractors and stuff like that. And it only had like 300 hours on it, but I've been sitting out for like 8 or 10 years. So the whole cab, I just kind of had to rip everything off and put everything new on. But, it's like, was well worth it for what I got. But everything else was perfect shape and had low hours. So yeah, the biggest thing I would look for, and then make sure you turn it on, and listen to it, and make sure that PTO's spinning. Yeah, like that's like a common thing. Like PTOs can go on tractors, and that's a big job too. It's the same thing. You got to tear the whole thing apart to get into the PTO clutch. So you want to know the PTO's working. That being said, maybe you find a tractor that's like PTO's broke, but it's got a loader and it's a good deal. And maybe you're like, hey, I'm just going to get the tractor, got a loader. I don't need the PTO. I'm going to get a box scraper. I'm going to do the chisel, like maybe you don't need the PTO, like that's an option too. Like it's got, sometimes you find these old cane tractors, they're big machines, and maybe you need a big machine for something, and they're cheap tractors, and the PTO might be shot on them. And you just put a disc on it, but you want the loader, So I would navigate that if you're looking at things like that. Tires, stuff like that, that's worn out, it's all replaceable. And then the other thing I would stick to is like brands. that you can get parts for. So I would stay away from stuff that you haven't heard of. Yeah, because they're out there. You know, like there's somebody was selling a Lamborghini tractor years ago, and a friend of mine bought it. And again, parts issues. You know, like Kubota, Pace, John Deere, all day long. I mean, and I'll recommend too, since we talked about it, Messick's. I know you use Messick's for parts.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's a company for tractor parts. I think they're based out of Pennsylvania or Ohio. They're called Messick's, and they're like priority mail just about anything to you, and it's about 50% cheaper than Bacon on most things. Yeah, and they're real helpful. And oftentimes with your tractors, you can get like a part schematic, and then you just find your part number, and then you can plug it in. But that's a good, of all the ones I've used, that's probably the best.
And Messick's also has good manual of the parts diagram.
The diagrams are great. So for all different types of machines. So they're a good company for getting tractor parts. Because for the most part, try to avoid Bacon in case, especially, and also for like your oils and stuff, like, you know, like you can read the specs on a lot of the oils, like you can go to O'Reilly and it's actually the same specs for a lot of that stuff. It's very steeply priced over there.
You recommend diesel or gas?
They don't really make much gas tractors I don't think anything is manufactured in gas anymore. So it's all going to be diesel. Yeah, mostly like little 3-cylinder diesels. The older tractors, a lot of the older tractors, like the old Fords and stuff, they ran on gas because farmers made their own ethanol. They just made their own fuel. Yeah, they grew their corn and ran their tractors. Yeah, and you can find those Ford the 8Ns. Yeah, I see them around sometimes. And again, they're 2-wheel drive tractors, but like I almost bought one. There was someone who had one on Mountain View a few months ago, and I was like so tempted, you know, just as like a little mower, you know, when it's dry, you know, because it's again, you buy these mowers, all these riding mowers and stuff. They're throwaway. You know, they're throwaway. You get them, you run them for a few, you know, maybe they're running for 8 to 10 years, but that's it. They're done. You know, they're destroyed. You know, they're throwaway. Where you get a 8N, 9N Ford, that thing's already 67 years old. It's not going to stop running. So, you know, consider mowing your grass that way. But I encourage you, you know, Craigslist is a cool place to see the tractor market. There's a guy actually, just sold him equipment the other day, called Puna Tractor. He's up in Mountain View, and he's full Puna Tick character, but he's been running this Puna Tractor business for almost like 20 years, buying and selling tractors, repairing them. So I think he has stuff on Craigslist sometimes. I don't even know if he's in the phone book or anything, but it's called Puna Tractor, and he actually comes across some good used machines. But yeah, finding used machines, and if you wanted to import something, it's called I think it's called Tractor House. It's like a major outlet. It's like in America that's got all the tractors for sale you could imagine. So yeah, if you want to get into the tractor rabbit hole and just look at what's out there, and then interested in shipping something, you know, like, because it can be a better deal. However, that all being said, you know, the way it is right now with Kubota, you know, 0 down, 0% for 6 years for a brand new machine, it's kind of unbeatable. You know, it's like, I mean, to be honest, as a farmer, I think it's gonna just make us all take better care of the land. You know, get a tractor and start working it. But I think they're like a year out on most equipment, so get your order in. But yeah, those are my suggestions for used equipment. And the thing is, with the used equipment that I like too, is like it's all going to be a little easier to work on. You don't have these like emissions. Like right now, all these tractors have the diesel emission. Yeah. The DEF thing. So you know, this thing has it, and like every few days, like it has to like burn off and stuff, and it's all been going fine. But when it doesn't go fine, I can't do anything about it. It's you call them. It's you call the mechanic. There's no shortcuts. You know, it's not like anything goes wrong with an older tractor. You could probably figure it out. You know, like you'll find a solution. They're very simple. There's no computer. You know, my tractor, I bypassed the starter. It's all push button. It's very, very simple. They're very simple machines. But the newer ones, you know, that is one of the hitches that someday I know we're going to have to face. That they have to go into Bacon because it's a computer that no one has. You know, so that's one of the, you know, yeah. What's that?
So of course they would design it that way.
Yeah, I mean that's how cars are pretty much designed these days too. You know, can't work on your car. That's why we drive old trucks. Yeah.
So speaking of, when are we going to have electric tractors?
They have them. Jack Johnson's got one on Oahu.
Oh, really?
Yeah, GoFarm did he had us out there at the GoFarm cohort. So yeah. So they exist. I think they come with a hefty price tag.
Yeah.
Was it
And
John Deere?
I don't know what he had. Yeah, I didn't go to the thing. My buddy went. They said it looked a little wimpy, but I mean it doesn't, like, they'll just build it bigger, you know. But yeah, they're in the pipeline, so to speak. But you know, the diesel motors, like, I mean, pretty much was one of the best inventions that humans ever kind of came up with. It's pretty bulletproof. But yeah, they're out there. They exist. Yeah, probably nice and quiet.
Yeah.
Speaking of quiet and going back to safety, I do want to mention that it's one of the things I wanted to mention is that, you know, sometimes a common thing with the tractor is, like, especially like as you're learning, I really encourage you, like, not to put your like music on and stuff when you're learning. You know, like I've graduated to, like, I've, like, listened to my music and I do my thing. But when you're first learning with the tractor, I would even, like, you know, I totally wear ear protection. Ear protection's important. But when you first start, you might want to, like, keep one ear open, you know, like off your ear protection, or even, like, don't use ear protection the first, you know, couple times, because you want to, like, learn the sound of your tractor. You want to know what it sounds like, and then put your headphones on and then, like, not be playing, like, 9 Inch Nails and stuff, you know, like you really want to learn what your tractor sounds like when it's sounding good, so that when something doesn't sound right, you know to stop the machine, because it does happen. Guaranteed. There's going to be a funny sound that's going to come, and it's not going to take too long. Like, you're going to hit something's going to break. Like, I don't know anyone that doesn't happen to. And you want to know that sound. If you're just going along and it's like, you know, just cruising, listening to music, and something's, like, rattling behind you because you didn't pay attention early on to that clean sound that you're looking for. So I just wanted to mention that as you begin your relationship with the tractor, because it's like your relationship with a machine. You know, you want to know what it sounds like in top shape, doing different things. You want to know what it sounds like to engage your PTO when that mower engages, when those splines engage. Like, you want to know those sounds, and what it sounds like to sound proper, so that, you know, when it doesn't sound proper, you know to stop. Right on. We're moving through. Wow, it's already 5. Okay, so I want to go over to the tractor and kind of go over and implement, do, like, some example stuff and on site. You guys want to drink some water?
You've only been here a few years, right?
We broke ground January 2020.
Yeah, I mean,
This was just Britton. Yeah. Like 40,000. Yeah. But for you guys, like, for like orchid land, I get a small. You can just get a small guy, you know, on like 25. But brand new, zero. Like I said, like, you know, they're right now it's 0 down, 0 interest. Like, if you or your son has good credit, you know, they might even have one on. Like, they just got a whole bunch in. The lot's full, so you all can go down there and tell them I sent you. Talk to Brooks. He's a good bro, actually. Down at Bacon, Brooks is the guy.
So the 25 get attachments for the
Yeah,
loader?
yeah, and the thing is with the smaller ones, you can actually get like the belly mower attachment.
Oh, so on the
You can,
front.
yeah, just for the smaller tractors. These ones don't have a belly mower attachment, but I would kind of avoid the belly mower because that's what gets so beat up on our terrain. Those belly mowers. Yeah, the little, like a little tractor with like a little like 4-foot flail mower and a loader, like you'd be stoked. You know, like that's what I want for to complement my big tractor. Like a, you know, because like mowing the grass, it's like again same thing. You go to these. You know, you get even like these $10,000 Skags that Steve sells. It's like they're done in 10 years. They're done. Like they're wore out. They can't handle it. Whereas the tractors are tractors. You know, the BTO with the flail and those like BX series, those small 20, 25 horses, they can get. You know, they can't zero turn like a Skag, but they can get almost anywhere a riding mower can get, and they're 10 times as heavy duty, and they're not going to go away. You know. And they're easier to work on, actually. Yeah. And you get a diesel.
What's the guy's name, your friend?
Oh, Brooks. Brooks works down at Bacon. He's like the salesman. He's a good guy. Okay, so,
That's awful clean.
yeah, it's pretty clean, I know. Should dirty it up. Good idea. Doesn't look like mine at home. So, I'm just gonna start it for a second and show you guys something. So, what I want to point out, like the common thing, like what I found last year when we did this tractor workshop, is one of the most. I'm just gonna try to take the last hour we have here and address probably the most common challenges that people have with tractors. And that's getting your implement on and off. Like that's what everyone has said on all the feedback I read. Getting the implement on and off is I think one of the hardest things that people have. So first thing, you gotta block your implement because you want it to be flat. Okay, level, that's different. You know, probably we're not gonna get level. There's no way. We're on a slope, but we want it to be on the same plane and grade as our tractor. So in this case, I have 4 points that I'm going to put it down onto. Okay. Now, by getting it in that way, what's going to happen is I'm going to like when it drops in that onto those 4 points and it's sitting like that. It's not the weight is taken off of the 3 point, right? When we say 3 point, we got 1, 2, 3. So these are the 2 3-point arms, and this is what we call the top link. Okay, so these are, you could call them the bottom links or the bottom arms. I don't know the technical term. Any technical term? Yeah, bottom link. Top link is correct. Well, you can quote me on that. I've always called them the 3-point arms. So first thing to do, you got to implement down, you got it level. The first part you take off is the last part you're going to put on. So the first part I always take off is my top link. Okay, and because I set it down level, the top link comes right off. Now if it wasn't totally level, I can adjust this top link to where it came loose, right? And then I can loosen my top link pin, which is different than my lower link pins, right? You guys remember that? Now, this Kubota's got this little cool thing there. Okay, so now that's out of the way. Got my top link free, right? Now I'm gonna take my drive shaft off, right? This is my drive shaft. So a drive shaft always has a, you're gonna take it off from the tractor side, right? This is our slip clutch, and although this looks like a shear pin, it's not a shear pin. This is more like a grade 8 bolt that attaches to the shaft here, okay? So don't be confused with that pin. If it was just a shear pin, this clutch assembly wouldn't be here. It would just be a pin, okay? So that's something to think about or to note. Shaft just slides off, right? So this is like, it's been worked, right? The shaft is a sliding shaft. And then if you guys come closer or not, all these 3 points have, there's different mechanisms. Some have a button you can push. Some, like in this case, it's like this bracket that slides back, right? And we'll get to that when we put it back on. So now we have our top link off. We have our drive shaft off. now we're gonna take off our arms, right? So we're gonna take our pin out, and then sometimes this is where it gets tight, right? And so what I like to do is you got this top link pin, and the top link pin is smaller, right? So it's not gonna get jammed up in there. So I'll often bring it through like that, and then I got my one linkage off. Usually, sometimes both are a little tight, but sometimes just one. This thing is kind of funny. Okay, so now our tractor's free, right? So now we can like drive away and put another implement on, and your other implement will be like on nice blocks, right? Because if it's not on nice blocks, you're gonna have issues, right? Like you're gonna have to change your arm assembly. So I'm gonna drive forward for a second, and I just want to show you about these arms and linkages. Okay, so here we have our two arms, and these arms are they're adjustable, right, in and out. Okay, and different tractors have different ways in which these arms go in and out. This tractor has my least favorite way, which is these turnbuckles, which kind of suck. There's much better ways, but these Kubotas come equipped with these turnbuckles. So another way that tractors do it is they actually have a piece of tubing and a pin, and that's it's actually, I learned it's like you have to aftermarket order them. In the old tractors, they just came that way. They didn't come with these turnbuckles. Okay, but we have these turnbuckles, and we're just gonna roll with them. If you wanted to delete these turnbuckles, you can actually buy a kit and get the tubing with just a pin. The pin is much quicker and much easier to work with. You don't have to loosen these little nuts and locking bolts. But this is what we got. I try to keep these like a little more than hand tight, but not too tight, because they can be really difficult to loosen after like you've been vibrating a mower for a while. They'll often either start to come loose, or they'll start to make themselves come tighter. So right now we just have these channel locks back here to make these adjustments on our turnbuckles. But I would recommend, if you only have these, turnbuckles, to buy the exact wrench that goes right there, and that lives with your machine. We had an adjustable wrench that was better than this one, but you know, it's GoFarm, and you know how that goes. So an adjustable wrench, or again, I always tell everyone, if there's any tool to have, it's the channel locks for sure. So these work for now. So then once you got your turnbuckle, everyone knows how a turnbuckle works, right? Right. So it's like I can widen it. I can adjust how these arms are going to work, because every implement, this distance isn't always the same, right? So when I move from this implement to the spader, for instance, the arms of the brackets for the spader are almost here, right? So I have to come over and I have to adjust this. I always like, another good thing to keep, a little trick, is always keep a bungee by your tractor, because what happens is when I do need to bring these in and I'm working by myself, I have to bungee these together, and it kind of keeps them together while I reverse into it. So like little thing, have a bungee, have one of these channel locks, and then these Kubotas have this little toolbox. This is where you can keep extra pins, different tools that you might want in the field for all the different things that can happen that you can address right away. Now, with these two arms, every tractor has one arm usually. Yeah, I haven't seen any that don't have more than one arm. But the one arm is adjustable here. So you guys see this arm is adjustable. This one's adjustable, but just by this pin, right? So I could lower this more. Generally speaking, like I don't do that. Like I've only done it when I put the moldboard plow on and done some plowing. So what I like to do is, this is probably this one. Ultimately, you're going to set these arms level, right? You don't want the arms different directions, okay? But a good rule of thumb is when you're putting an implement on, and maybe you don't know that these arms are level yet, or like level with the tractor, or like you just hopped on someone's used tractor, or like, I don't know, something happened and you just don't know. Always put the arm that is not adjustable first, because then you can adjust this one height wise. Okay, does that make sense? And this is like tight. So again, there's better setups than this. A lot of them, like on my tractor at home, this has like a shaft that comes up, and I can actually spin it up and down from my seat. And other tractors have, like, when they get real fancy and big, they have like push button hydraulics. It's really like you can have a coffee and put your implement on. But this one's not like that. This one is like you might bust your fingers, and you know, it's like this thing is kind of tight, and you can see how like I've been cursing at it before. So, you know, one thing to note, like with tractors, is that you're likely gonna pinch your fingers at some point. You're likely gonna like bang your leg on something at some point, right? Yeah. So just you know, you're likely to shed a little blood for your tractor at some point, or like, you know, like use words that you might not use at dinner. So that can happen, but I want to like avoid, like you want to avoid that as much as possible. And these are, looking at these things and understanding how they work will help you with that. Because this is a common place where people get really frustrated. Like, what's that turnbuckle doing? You know, what is this? How come this has threads on it? Like, what is it really doing? Okay, well, what this is doing is it's making it adjust up and down. What this turnbuckle is doing is making it go in or out accordingly. Those are the only adjustments that this tractor has back here. And they're all gonna like pinch your fingers and get tight and all this kind of stuff, because when we start running the mower or the tiller, these bolts, as tight as we can make them, they might shift or move. So it's a really common thing I share with, you know, people using the tractor. Is like, okay, you're gonna go out and mow, you're gonna learn how to mow, all right, you're gonna learn how to mow. Make sure to keep watching your implement, because this top linkage, if this bolt starts to come loose, now that setting, because this top linkage sets the mower up or down in the back, if it gets loose and it starts loosening, now all of a sudden you had a level mower when you were mowing, now all of a sudden you have your mowers popping a wheelie. Okay, so those are things to watch. You really want to pay attention to your implements and your linkage. And again, it's a little frustrating sometimes with these tractors, because you don't want to make these locking bolts too tight, because then they're like a bear to get off, but you want to make them tight enough so they don't back off and loosen. So again, so much of the tractor is going to rely on your guys paying attention. You know, it's not just like, oh, I got my mower on, I'm going to mow for 4 hours. You're going to mow, but you're going to be looking back at this machine regularly. You're going to like peek on your implements. You know, when I mow, my hand just lives on the lever of up and down, because the terrain is constantly moving, and I want to get the best cut I can one time. So it's not like two hands driving, it's like one hand here, right? I'm constantly moving this up and down. And you can see with my mower, I take off my wheel, this rear wheel. So I don't run that big rear wheel in the back, because our terrain is so up and down and so moving, this wheel really becomes an issue. And the tractor, with the strength of the 3-point hitch, I've never needed one of these wheels. They just take up more room. In fact, that needs to be cut. Will you cut that, Sean?
That's good to know, because I lost both my wheels and I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Is that an issue?
Put them aside. Try to sell them on Craigslist. No. Yeah, it's not an issue. I'm going to point out in a minute when we put the machine back together, what's an issue now with the wheel off is if that top link gets too long and now the mower starts to go like this. That's where it's an issue. So what you need to do, and we'll do it here in a minute, is when we lift up the mower, is going to look real weird, yeah, when it gets tall, because it's going to be all like inverted like this. But as we drop it down, that's what we're trying to find, is what's the level where we're cutting our grass, right? And then we can adjust that with the top link. So now I have, so now let's say like, all right, it's time to like link up, yeah?
One other adjustment you forgot to mention. You got 3 points
Oh yeah.
to attach your top link.
Right, yeah, there's that. So thanks for pointing that out. I'm gonna like clean it off. It's like, as you can see, we never use that one. Yeah. What do you like to adjust your top link for? Do you ever use it? Do you ever adjust your top link?
Yeah.
Yeah?
With my flail mower.
Oh, with your flail, yeah.
Yeah. If I put it in the top link, I can't lift the flail mower very high.
Uh-huh, right.
It changes.
Yeah. Changes your height.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so we have these three.
What the manual said, because I just looked this up
Okay.
days ago.
Good, let's hear it.
Because there's a lot of discussion on different forums and stuff.
Yeah.
And there's lots of tractor forums. Which you can learn
Different
right ways
things.
and wrong ways.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of opinions out there on tractors and stuff, but the manuals do point out that if you're doing heavy groundwork like plowing, you want the top link in the bottom pin.
Yeah.
And the top link is just for light or stuff that's not doing much ground contact.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's my understanding is it's like a depth thing, right? It's like a depth thing. It's also kind of like with this pin here, right, where we can adjust this pin here. So it's how we can deepen that. So this pin, again, we don't do really deep groundwork except for when we run the spader, and I only run the spader like twice a year. And oftentimes when I run the spader, I'll actually bring my bigger tractor because it does better with that bigger equipment. But for the most part, like for what purposes of mowing and things, we like keep it at the top. But thanks for pointing that out, that this is one more adjustment, a height adjustment than you have. So for plowing and stuff, when you want things to go lower, you can drop this this top link down, and they even give you an extra little pin. So this is a good spot to keep an extra pin as well that lives here. So, any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, just when you're changing implements, is there a science to adjusting, along that X and Y axis, or is it just figure it out?
So what I'm gonna do right now, like it was just set for this implement, and I just showed you guys how the turnbuckles are loosened. And right now, see these, I don't have the lock nuts locked on it, right? So it's like loose. So if you're like coming upon a new implement, or you're just like learning how to put implements on, it's nice to like I'm a little far from the machine, and this is where it can come in handy to like grab your bungee and be like, okay, when you're by yourself, be like, all right, that's my distance. You could pull out a tape if you wanted to and be like, okay, what's this and what's this? Or you could just jump on the machine and get closer, right? And then adjust. What's nice about the bungee is it gives you something to work against, like it's gonna keep it, it's gonna stabilize it, it's not gonna move at all, because it's kind of lighter arms, yeah? So once we hook it up, then what I'm gonna show you is like those arms, if they're loose, your mow deck will be all swingy in the back, and that's a really common thing I see. Like you lift up your mower, and all of a sudden the mower like spins this way or spins that way, or like it's kind of tracking weird behind the tractor. So you want to make it tight, but you don't want to make it like ridiculously. It doesn't want to have play.
This way or that way?
You'll see, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions before I come back?
I think the biggest thing was making sure this is level, right?
Yeah, well, just that it's on blocks, you know what I mean? By it being on blocks and by it being taken off in a good way, we know we can get it back on in a good way, right? Like, if you're really fighting the machine, fighting an implement to get it off, it means you didn't block it well. Like, that's ultimately what it means, you didn't block it well. Because now, the arms aren't gonna, like one arm's lower than the other. So take your time blocking your implement when you set it down. Yeah.
So you're on nice level ground. The tractor's the same level as the mower. That's a luxury in a lot of places. I mean, I don't have that very much. I don't have a place to store stuff that's everything perfectly level. So a big problem is when you back up. Well, one, you got to get like coming down a runway.
You got to line up.
Right,
you got to line up these arms right away.
And you got to be right on the center line.
Yeah.
Center line and the center line. And if you got a little angle between them, now.
Yeah, I'm gonna point that out. That's where the O bar comes.
There
in.
you go.
That's how you do it. The O bar is the way. That's the way. He knows.
Yes.
And I pointed that out last year and was like, oh my god, the O bar. I'm like, see?
Yeah.
So you can adjust that way, and that even happens on the level ground where you need to.
Yeah.
Might need to adjust micro like that, and the O bar works, but it only works with this kind of equipment. You can't do it with the spader.
That's to
Can't move it.
this.
Yeah, just to move it that way if the arms don't align perfectly. Now, that all being said, I'll say like it's worth it to try to make like your spot where the implement lives, right? Like you want to find like, okay, you have 4 implements or you have 3 implements. You want to go, okay, this implement lives there, that implement, and they have to live in different places because you got to take one off to put one on, right? So, and then what I like to do is like you have those blocks for that implement, right? So it's like maybe you do have some unlevel ground. Okay, well maybe, all right, I'm going to use 2 2x4s and a 2x, or like in a 4x4 for that side, and that whole side is one way, and that's, but ultimately the best you can go for is to try to, whatever slope you're on, if you're like this, both the tractor and the implement to try to be on the slope together. Because you're not trying to necessarily find level ground, but just that it's the same with connecting the 2 pieces, right? It's like the puzzle has to come together straight, you know? The tricky thing is when people do it like if it's like a slope this way and then you try to put it down and your tractor's one way and you know and then you're just fighting it. So if you have a loader, you know, and you do some work, it's worth it to take your time to carve out something for your implements. And like I said, the implements are like you want to keep them stored dry. You want to keep them under cover. So like they're super valuable. So if you don't have something like right for them, like make something right for them, you know, because they're, you know, this is like big bucks, you know, big investments. And having switched implements like a lot in my life with different tractors and different things, the better you can set up your implement changing, the much you're going to be so much more efficient. So taking the time to be like, okay, this is where this implement lives, this is where this implement lives, this is how I take it off, these are the blocks for this implement. It's going to save you like a ton of time down the road. Like sometimes I see these implements and they're just like taken off, right, in the grass. If an implement is just taken off in the grass and it's like, you'll see it, you'll kind of kick it off the tractor, you'll pound out a pin and the thing will just fall down and be like, all right, I'm off to do the next thing. Well, when you come back to that implement, you're bummed. You're like basically gonna have to turn around, you're gonna have to lift it up with a chain with your loader, you're gonna have to reset it, all that stuff you could have done, right? You're gonna have to get it set so that it sits to receive your 3-point, right? Or you're gonna have to like get that O bar, you're gonna have to like jack it up and like try to hold it, and then you're gonna pinch your fingers, you're gonna bleed, you're gonna curse, and all you had to do was, okay, I'm gonna get my blocks, I'm gonna set it down on my blocks. Right? Like you guys see them, right? These implements all over and they're just like over there. The only way to get a lot of those back on is you're gonna have to lift it with your bucket and reset it. You know, certain implements, you don't need to. Certain implements are like, a good example is a, well, what's up there? The working toolbar, like anything that's a box scraper often, boom, if it's a box and it'll just set down, if you can set down your machine and that top link can come off with no problem, you're usually top notch. But if that top link is like, you're banging that out, yeah, you're gonna be in trouble later. Because you can bang it all out and it can just fall down, but coming back to it is where you're gonna wrestle it. Like so, box scraper, oftentimes like a disc, you know, just a big disc. You can just set that thing down out in the field, put it aside, come back to it, and link right back up, you know. But yeah, when it comes to like this thing, even if I just set this on the ground, I've done it, and I just set it on the ground, like, oh, I'd go fast, I don't need my blocks. Yeah, now you're back, and it's like the arms maybe don't go quite low enough anymore because it's really low, and then you're like, oh, should I change this? I'm like, no, you don't want to change that. That's where you want it, you know, because we want to try to keep I really like to try to keep my arms where I don't need to change my arms when I'm changing implements, right? Other than this distance that I have to, like I have to change this distance to match up to these brackets. But when these arms are set level, they're set level. Like you really don't want to have to change them. Okay, so now we're going to reverse. Again, I always like to line up my non-movable arm, and I put the pin into that first, and then if I have to do any adjustment, I do it with that, and then get it in. And so this is another thing going on. If your implement is wonky, right? Like say for instance we didn't have another 2x6, and so this implement is now this way, but our tractor's this way. So now in order to get it on, I'm gonna have to lower this arm, right? And then I'm gonna be able to stick my pin in. But now when I lift up my mower's gonna be like this. So now I'm gonna have to jack this up. And this thing is not easy to jack up. It's not like the one I have at home that's like I can just go like that, and it's like real nice with the box scraper and stuff because you can cut in roads. This thing's heinous, like it's miserable. You don't want to do it. I'm just telling you, it's like miserable. It's like I don't even know what there's not even a thing to put up. It's like I don't even know what the design is. Like who designed that?
Cheap.
Yeah, it's terrible. You know, it's like a $40,000 tractor and it's got turnbuckles on it. You know, give me a sleeve and a pin. You know, give me something to make it easy on myself, but they don't. So we got to make it easier on ourselves by thinking it through so that it's going to stay put and our implements are how we want them. Okay, so I'm going to back up. Okay, so I'm really like focusing like my eye on this bracket here, and oftentimes you'll have like a little bit of play in the 3-point. Like you can almost always come up. Up is easy, but like when you turn off the machine, you know, you'll have that movement, but you won't really have a lot of down. But you have down, like without turning on the machine, you can adjust your 3-point lever if you want to go down. But I have my height pretty good, but I can see my my pin is a little off, and I did that on purpose, okay? Because I would have done it right. But I see it's a little off, so now I'm gonna go to my handy O bar.
This is where my case has
Extensions.
yeah. You can
extend it.
push it and you can extend it
Yeah.
and it locks back to
Yeah.
you. That is
Super handy.
so handy.
Yeah, so
So handy.
like he's saying, they have these little brackets or big brackets on the arms where you can move the bracket, so you don't have to pull out the O bar in this situation. But a lot of machines don't.
But both arms go up and down together. They don't. You can't do this with the arms. So if they're not on.
Oh yeah, you don't have an adjustment this way?
Oh, I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you have to go to the
Yeah.
turnbuckle or the. Oh, but you don't
This
want
one.
to adjust that turnbuckle
This one.
because you don't want to unlevel. So you go to the O bar because if you're you know, I mean I have places where my tractor's not quite in the same spot as it was before, and
So usually you just gotta go O bar. That's probably it right there. Got it close enough. Yep. Even took it too far. So then we're gonna go back. I won't go. I can do it that way, but just for the purposes. I'm not moving that fast today. So, and again, it's like little bits, you know, I was really close.
where that it's a spring loaded and then it comes out and then it just locks back.
Yeah, I know the little piece. So then, so we have our first arm in, right? And this is the procedure. So, like if you try to do a different procedure, you're gonna get jammed up, right? If you're like, oh, that's not lining up, but I can put the shaft on. Don't. It's like putting the cart before the horse, you know. So get that first pin in, right? Then come around, and now I see, okay, I gotta go back that way. You pass me the bar, and then we're gonna put the bar. Bring it back like that. And now we're a little high because we adjusted this a little bit. So I'm gonna send this down a little bit. Okay. And then we put our pin through. Okay. So now we have our 2 pins set, right? So what I like to do is just make that so it feels snug. This linkage here, because I know we made an adjustment. So I'm just gonna bring it till it feels like, oh, okay, it wants to start lifting it, but I'm like, there's no way I can lift it with my hand. Now I know it's like it's matching the height of this, right? Because we had to adjust it a little bit. So now I can lock my bolt, right? This little lock nut. And again, I'm not gonna go like crazy locking it, but just a little tug. And this one, like I said, I really try not to adjust this height at all. I set it and it's good. The turnbuckles I have to change, and the turnbuckles commonly come loose when we mow, right? So like the mower will be all great, and same as this the top link. This lock nut has a tendency to loosen, and that's what you'll see in a minute. So now I can put my handy bungee away. And now before I do the top link, I'm going to do the drive shaft so the top link's not in my way, right? Because then I was just like fighting something else.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Does the bottom links, does that one need to...
We're going to lift it, and I'm going to show you, because that's where we're going to see the play, and then we'll do that. That's the top link this way, and this way is the final adjustment once we get it set, because we can't lift it right now, right? Because in all of our top link, it'll just go like that. So we'll do our PTO. So this is pretty cool. This tractor, this PTO, it spins the drive shaft forward, and then the splines can just line up. Some tractors don't have that luxury, and you kind of gotta. I'll have to spin it from here, or in the case of the spader, right? When I hook that up to my bigger tractor, you can't move the spader. There's no moving the spader, and there's no moving the shaft. So I actually have to run the tractor and have to turn on my PTO and keep trying, turning it on, and then until you finally line it up. Sometimes you're lucky, and sometimes it takes longer, but that's what's really nice about this is I'm just spinning this shaft that's on the tractor, right? Because I don't need to spin this. A rotary mower is spinnable. Like I could just spin this here, and it would spin to a line, right? And then all I'm trying to do is get the splines connected, and then I'm gonna focus on pulling it back and sliding it forward for it to lock. If you try to do both at the same time, it's gonna be difficult, and you might start saying those words that you don't say at the dinner table and bust your finger. So I'm just getting it lined up there, and now I'm gonna pull back on the sleeve so the button comes soft and goes in there. And then you'll hear it click, right? And then it's locked on. Okay, so we got that on, we got their 2 links on. Now we're gonna do our top link. So again, this was the equipment it was just on, so it's pretty close. It just needs to come out a little bit. Okay, and then remember our top link pin is different. So like you get over here and you try to put on a lower linkage pin and you're like having a hard time. So get this guy on. Okay. So now now we have all our linkages on, right? Now we could, in theory, we could turn on the tractor and turn on the PTO and put on 9-inch nails and go mow. But you want to check a few things first. So I usually like to, again, I like to make my top link where it's just starting to get snug, right? So it's this top link, see I'm starting to lift the back of the tractor. So I have enough leverage to do so.
Because you've got it greased. Let it sit out and get rusty and then try it.
Yeah, I'm telling you guys, don't leave your machines out.
Yeah.
I've seen those machines. I bought them and restored them.
Yeah.
Okay, so now what we want to check, before we check our level of our, this way, okay, because we're on our blocks, we're not going to get that perfect because we're at the blocks, right? If we want to get a real low cut on our grass. Now we want to take the machine and go like this. Oh, little bugger's tight. So now a lot of times, for the sake of learning, I'm going to loosen these up a whole bunch. This is like probably one of the most common things that I see is that these linkages are like this. And then here's your rear implement. This is like dangerous, yeah? So it's sliding around like that. The center of gravity gets weird. You lift it up, it's weird, you know? So we want to tighten that up. So we get our turnbuckles, we start tightening it up. Now what we don't want to do is tighten it all up one direction, right? We don't want to like, okay, it's real tight now, but now the whole machine, now the whole rear implement's on one side. So there's two ways you can do it. One way is like you can like tighten it to a certain point and see about how many threads you have or what's here on your turnbuckle. And that's kind of how I do it. And then I'll like go to the other one and I'll be like, okay, I got about 3/8 of an inch and 1/2 an inch. And sometimes like on a hill, you know, you'll kind of feel, oh, which way is it going? And then if you want, you can come back here and just kind of eyeball it and go, okay, am I getting that side or that side? You can look at your equipment, right? But I think probably the best way to do it and not be walking around so much is to just be tightening from here. And sometimes, like I said, you kind of got to move it. Like it's nice to move it while you turn it, and then you're not like binding. Like you're not trying to turn the whole implement by turning the turnbuckle. You can kind of like move it with your arm, and then it's real easy to turn.
So do you want a little bit of play? Or
The tiniest bit. I'll show you what I go for, and then maybe someone will say different, but that's what I go for. So then I'm gonna like, and also I'm looking at that turnbuckle, right? I'm looking at this this clevis, actually. It's called a clevis. That it's not like fall down. It's not like leaning down, right? That clevis is starting to come tight. You see the two clevises, these guys, and that one where the turnbuckle's attached. So then I'm getting snug, and then when I get my like final snugness, that's when I'll like maybe come back one time and just take a look, you know, and try to like line something up, you know, be like, okay, I'm gonna look at the edge of my wheel well, and I got like what, 4 or 5 inches right there, and I'm actually only got like 3 there, so the whole thing actually wants to come this way. Maybe again, if it's only an inch off, then it actually needs to move 1/2 an inch, right? So I'm gonna loosen this one, and in theory, I shouldn't have to tighten it again, right? I just loosen it, and then I can pull it up, and then this is where I can pull it as I tighten, yeah. You know what I mean? And then I'm not trying to, I'm like pulling and turning at the same time, and then I can check again. And look at that. Looks about right. Could maybe come back a little bit. But ultimately, I would be happy. I'm pretty happy with that. And I like it tight. I run them tight. I don't really like to have loosey equipment in the back, you know.
The lock nut, does it loosen once in a while?
Yeah, so this is mindful tractor operating. So now we're gonna tighten our lock nuts, which again, I'll just have to say, it's a really bad design to have it like this, because already these threads are getting beat up. They're not like real easy. I've had to take these off and file them clean again, you know, just so that it's in working order. So what I like to do is I get them snug, and then take your handy dandy channel locks and don't over tighten them, because they're a real bear to if they start to turn and tighten too much, and then when you go to put on a different implement and you're like hating it, you know. But tighten them enough where they're not going to come loose. And the thing is, you can't necessarily see these turnbuckles. I mean, you can see them okay from the cab, but not super well. But you're going to know when you lift up that implement to make a turn, and all of a sudden your mower goes, and you're like, oh, I didn't set it like that. Because you'll feel it, right? Because you're an operator now, and like everything your tractor's doing, you're aware of it, right? So when that implement comes up and you make a turn and it swings, you don't want it to swing, right? Because it'll change that movement on the tractor. So then we snug up the other side. See, look at that. I'm giving a little blood even today. Proper class. And yeah, I really recommend getting the exact size wrench for these turnbuckles. I think it's a 19 millimeter, by the way, if we're getting technical. Pretty sure it's 19.
This is a 6-foot deck?
No, 5.
5 foot.
Yeah.
Is that like maxed out for this?
Yeah, 6 foot would be too much. 72 inches. I mean, it would take it, but it's nice to have it right on the wheel well, you know, on the outside wheel well, for my purposes. Yeah. And especially for purposes of like GoFarm, where, you know, other people might be using it. It's nice to have everything within the wheel base. You know, when you're learning, if like you buy a tractor and you get something and something's outside of the wheelbase, you got to be more aware. You know, like my mower at home is an offset flail, so it's like 2 feet out on one side. It's great for mowing around the fences and all kinds of stuff, but if you don't know, then yeah, you're not being careful. Suddenly you're messing things up. Okay, so now we've set our 2 turnbuckles, right? So now we're tight. Our machine is how we want it back here, right? That's perfect, at least for me. Someone might say something different. And now we just want to confirm our level to the grass, and this which is what we determine with our top link. Okay, so now is where a couple things come into play. Mainly, how low do you want to cut your grass? And how high is your grass? How many passes are you making? For the most part here, like at GoFarm, we're able to cut the grass really low now. I want to get a low cut because I want to not mow again until I have to. And nowadays it's like every week, but in the wintertime it's different. So I'm going to pull forward just a little bit off of these blocks, and then we can adjust that. So it's pretty close, but so right now, like the mower's angled, right? But this angle, like I don't want to adjust it because I'm going to be mowing much lower. So I'm going to put it down, not to the ground, but where I want it to be when I mow. And I'm going to take a look at it. And right now, here, I got to turn it back on. So, like, it's pretty level. Like I'm pretty happy with it, but I don't know if you guys noticed, but when I put it down, it felt like the back hit a little bit sooner than the front. Did you guys notice that? It was like super minor, like most people would run with it like that, but I'm just gonna lift that back up a touch. That much, that's it. Now, when I drop it, I feel like I got an even drop on the ground, okay? And now I'm gonna lock this bolt up, this guy. And again, this is probably the most common one that comes loose. And you'll start your day off, you'll be mowing, and then you'll be going along, everything's good. And then all of a sudden you start like mohawking the grass because your mower's now like this, right? Because what happens is, this guy, this bolt will come loose from all that force, and that bolt will just kind of peel back a little bit, and then this will just start to loosen, right? And it doesn't take much. You guys can see just a couple turns goes a long way out there. And all of a sudden it's like this, and it looks like maybe from the cab, because you didn't look down and look at your top link, you didn't notice that this bolt is off. You're looking back at it and you're like, oh, it looks level. Okay, but then, because you didn't look at that bolt, now when we put it down, our back's touching first. So the mower's a little bit like this, which means that the blades are like that too. So as you're cutting the grass, let's do it like that, you're cutting like this rather than level. Okay, so this is like the most common thing. You can drive around the coast and see it happening when people are driving with tractors, you know. So you really want to watch that, and that's where, you know, that wheel sometimes helps, like, you not feel that or see that, but that wheel also gets in the way of all kinds of things. Why it's off your tractor, why it's off mine, you know, and why it's a huge hassle, and it creates your turnaround is miserable. And you got this wheel sticking way out there, you know. So it's one of the bonuses of having a flail mower too, is that everything's right here. You know, you don't get this big rotary. So then when that happens, you shut off the machine. Get it back up, and again, don't be deceived by it looking level when it's 8 inches, 10 inches off the ground. You're not cutting, if you're cutting the grass, if you want to cut the grass at this height, then it's set perfect. But if I want to cut the grass as low as I can cut it, where, you know, I'm pretty much running on my plates, then I want to have this up. And then you lock that off. And then another really good rule of thumb with your implements always is whenever you stop the machine, make sure they're all the way down. It's like, it was always our thing with the kids on the farm and stuff, you know, like, you know, one kid decides to get up there and push something, and then the other kid's over here, and then they're, you know, stubbed a toe, you know. So yeah, always put your implements down when you park or you stop for the day, or don't leave things up, you know. It's a good practice, safety practice. Any questions? What time is it? Time check?
5:52.
Right in the game.
You're gonna fire it up?
What's that?
You're gonna show everyone how to fire it up, or?
You guys want to fire it up? It's got a key, an ignition. Is there anything else you guys want to see? Oh, you guys want me to run it?
Sure.
Okay. There's always grass to cut.
Maybe just how to properly start it with
Okay,
all this.
I'm going to bring it right out here then.
Okay.
swap the turnbuckles for the tunes?
Yeah.
What's that cost?
I don't know. You gotta go to Bacon and ask. Yeah, you could probably make them. That's what I thought, you could make them. Okay, so just a quick rundown on starting it. These things, I don't think they don't have glow plugs anymore, so you can just fire it right up. And starts like a car. Basic stuff, you got your throttle right here. These two fancy buttons have to do with that admission control. So I'm not going to get into those. I always have to read the manual myself about when to use them. But again, this is like as simple as it gets. All we have is one lever for the 3-point arm control back here. There's another opening here for another lever. If like this was a bigger machine, it would have like a draft lever. You got a clutch over here. So because this is a standard transmission, so you got four gears. You got your forward reverse is over here, and then you have a high low. So like your rabbit or your the two levers over here. This is what they call a shuttle, this forward and reverse. So once I'm set in a gear, like let's say I'm in 3rd gear and I'm in my turtle mode, everything I do is going to be forward, reverse in 3rd gear. I'll be at that speed, 4th gear, so forth. Pretty much most of the farm work, field work, loader work, you're always going to be in the turtle. Sometimes when I mow, I get into like high 2 if it's like real easy mowing. But for the most part, especially with learning, when you guys are learning, just everything in the turtle. You're like the turtle, not the rabbit. Not trying to win the race. Lights, I don't know. We're not working at night, but there's, if you know, for home farm and stuff, the lights could come in handy. You got your cup holder for coffee or anything else you like to drink. Yeah, this is the, on this tractor, they're different on different tractors, but this is your PTO lever down here. Okay, so this engages the PTO. Most tractors, in this one, you have to put the clutch in to engage the PTO. And when you're engaging the PTO, this is important with a mower or with just about any, with a mower in particular, you want to actually not engage it at a high RPM. You want to engage it at like just like 1,000 RPM, and then on all the dials will have a PTO, kind of like the sweet spot for the PTO, and then you'll bring your RPM up to that PTO 540 mark, and then your PTO comes up to speed. If you put your RPM at 540 and then engage your PTO, you can damage your gearbox on just about anything. If you get real slick, you can actually like release your clutch slow enough that you can start it at that speed, but it's a good practice to start it at a lower RPM and then build up to that RPM speed for your gearbox protection. And that's all controlled through here. Most tractors have this little foot pedal here. It's just like an extra boost, like maybe you're going up a hill and you're losing some power, and then you can just push this, but 99% of the time you don't use that. You're really controlling all your RPMs from your throttle here. It's your loader arm. And this is your brake. All tractors have like a brake lock, where you can lock it in place. Whenever you're like getting off the tractor, if you're leaving it on and locking the brake, it's always good to like put down an implement too. It kind of like really stabilizes it. And then usually like right here, this is like locks the differential. That's the differential lock. And then this guy here is the 4-wheel drive. So yeah, up is 4-wheel drive and down is 2-wheel drive. This tractor pretty much just lives in 4-wheel drive. Again, if you're doing like a lot of work on the roads or something, you can put it in 2-wheel drive, you'll save some fuel. That's about it. Maybe you'll save some bearings over the course of the long haul.
Speaking of fuel, what's your fuel burn in this tractor?
What's my economy? Like fuel economy?
Yeah, like how much do you get an hour?
Shoot, I haven't done that math.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty efficient, I would say. But
well, that's when you talk about fuel efficiency. I mean, I figure on my tractors maybe a gallon an hour.
Yeah.
So
it depends on what it really depends on the RPMs. Yeah.
Exactly,
like if you're running, like if you're mowing and you're at 540, like if you're at 2,500 RPMs just for hours, yeah, you're definitely probably burning like that. And then if you're like when I'm turning compost piles and stuff, I just run it as low as I can, but still be strong enough, you know. Or if like we're working as a crew or something and doing something light, just run it lower. But at that 25 RPM, I bet there's a spec somewhere of what you're burning. Yeah, I bet it's like somewhere around there. But yeah, I think that.
But you know, mowing is my biggest fuel burner.
That's the fuel burner.
And it's only a gallon an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, for the work that it does, that 1 gallon of diesel did. Oh my God.
Yeah, like I said, going back to Andy Sarhanis, if there's one farm tool to have, that if you had to get rid of all your farm tools, you know, the tractor is what you'd keep, you know. You'd keep it over your truck.
Yeah.
Guaranteed. Get rid of the truck, keep the tractor. You know, it's the one you keep. It's super efficient. They're little 3-cylinder diesels. You know, it's the most bulletproof motor built. You know, these 3-cylinder diesels they're all over the world still running. They're gonna run forever. They're gonna go and go and go. And you know, you can so that's that. And then, you know, just to point out, like when I'm referring to when I'm referring to like the tippy tractor, like it's pretty good not to like drive around your tractor with your loader up all the time, you know. My neighbor, he bought a new tractor and he just drives around with his loader up all the time, and it's dangerous. It makes you much more tippy. You know, the more you can find that, you know, spot, there's a spot like down low, you know, not where you're going to be bumping in, you know, grabbing grass and stuff. And on our terrain, again, your hands, when you're working, your hand is here with the mower and also here, because sometimes you got to turn and you might need to lift the bucket to make a turn, but then put it back down. There it goes. And then you do your mowing. Oh, I got to make this turn and there's a tree, there's a hedgerow or something. I'm going to lift the bucket, I'm going to maneuver, and then I'm going to put it back down. But don't get into this habit of running your machine with your bucket all the time, because what'll happen is that'll just become your habit. And all of a sudden it's up there and you get on some slope and you even forgot it's up there, because visibility, it's nice when it's up there. You know, when I'm doing my spading work and stuff like that, I like to have it up because I really want to see my line and my fields. But when I'm mowing, it's like you're going, and also you get on these slopes that are wonky. So, you know, find that spot for your bucket when you go up, you know, get it back down as soon as you can. And also, you know, as mowing, you know, your hand is going to live on this 3-point lever, so that you're constantly adjusting for the terrain so that you can get the best cut you can, so you can be fuel efficient. You're not like coming back over things because, you know, you were too high or too low. Or again, as that terrain changes, you'll learn as your tractor moves across the landscape, that thing will come up. It'll move with the tractor. You actually want to put it back down, or oh, you're making a turn, you need to get it up so it doesn't bite into something. This is all that kind of stuff that you'll learn over time. But you know, just know that these 2 levers on a simple machine like this, your hand lives here when you're using them. You know, even with the tillage and disking, anything like that, if your machine starts to bog down, you got to have your hand right here to like kind of come up with it so you can keep going, you know, because you'll bog it down. And this kind of, we have, you know, thick soil and, you know, rock over in Puna. It's like you're gonna find the edge of your machine, guaranteed. You know, guaranteed you'll find, oh, that's maxed out, you know. You'll find that edge, and then, you know, throttle back. Don't always be on that edge, otherwise, you know, your machine, you won't be passing it on to your grandkids. Yeah.
Britton, I have a question.
Yeah.
When you're working with soil, is there a rule of thumb to know how wet is too wet to take the tractor? Or
Yeah.
How do you tell?
That's a good, yeah, too wet is, like, if you're on the cusp, you can go out and like do a bed and you'll know right away if you're making poi. You know, that's how, like I was told, if you start making poi, then it's too wet, you know, and you're gonna know right away. There's like a cusp, you know. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, when it gets real rainy, you can't do field work. Yeah. You know, it's like, it's not happening. And you'll know quick because the machine will bog down, and mostly it's not so much like, oftentimes it's not so much your tillage equipment, it's more like your wheels just destroying your pathways, you know, just like you're just making mud, you know. Sometimes like it'll look like, oh, the tilling looks okay, you know, it looks okay, but you're just making a mess. and it's like the soil dries out pretty quick on the surface. It'll hold moisture deep down, but you know, when it gets real wet, like you can just one dry day window can be enough to get equipment in and get a job done. Yeah.
What is the maintenance of the hydraulic oil?
The hydraulic oil is connected to the transmission oil. So it's like, I think on the manual, it's like change it the first 200 hours and every 400 hours after that. And it's an expensive change because it takes like almost 10 gallons of oil. It's back here, the transmission oil. And then I believe it's got 2 filters on that side. Yeah, the 2 filters. Usually do the filters, and it's a simple change. Just have a big pan, you know. But ultimately, like, yeah, that the hydraulics is connected to the transmission fluid, so you know, you just change it and change the filters, not too much. And the oil filter is easy to change. And then, yeah, like we were saying, keep the grease nipples the zerks greased, and then you have like you have all your zerks for the loader, and then you have like, there's a couple zerks down here on your steering arms to be mindful of. And then sometimes there's a zerk, yeah, there's like a zerk under there on the front of the drive shaft here where the axle moves this way. Again, you have to get underneath there, but it's in the manual. But yeah, keep it greased like that, and then just change the oil at the intervals. And you know, those are your biggest maintenance issues. I mean, since we're out here by the tractor, I will point out, so you guys can see on those rims, so you see this, you guys see this disc here on the rims, this disc here, got this inner disc, and here, actually, does this have one? Yeah, the front tires can only have 2 settings, right? You can only move them 2 ways. But these rear ones, you can actually take your tire off, and then these bolts, you can go on either side of that, the bracket on the rim, and that's how you can adjust your tires. So like, if I wanted these tires to be wider, right, I could get another, it's like almost another 2 inches on each side, get like almost 4 inches wider. But that would change the distance of my beds, right? So like when we spade, we want those beds to match our BCS, right? So then we'd be wider, and it would change everything, right? You'd start changing like how many beds you can fit in a whole field, or multiple fields once you start changing that. But again, if like you're an orchard or you know, real slopey terrain, I would just set those rear tires as wide as you can get them. Yeah, and just, I mean, you can really, you know, like, that's significant. It's like significant center of gravity change. You know, 2 inches on each side or 3 inches on each side really would changes the stability of the tractor. Yeah.
When you have those computer emission deals that you got to bring in, is that like $500 a pop?
I have no idea. I've never had to do it. I don't. Yeah, I imagine it's a service thing that they just come out and service it, and I'm sure. I think if those guys leave the yard, you're not going to be spending less than $500. I know that like as soon as they leave the yard, you're paying $100 an hour. Yeah, yeah. So, well, that just about covers the first stage. You guys can all go get a tractor and get to it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Any other questions before Kyle? Yeah, I run bio in my truck. I'd maybe be a little touchy with some of these newer mowers putting too much in, or newer motors, but at the same time, I think the 50-50 blend is good. It's like what the county runs. They're the biggest biodiesel burner on the island. That's what biodiesel plant mostly makes their fuel for, is running all the diesel jennies. They run them 50-50 because it keeps the injectors clean. So I wouldn't be afraid to put it in, but
you don't have to convert.
But it's like, yeah, no, you don't have to convert anything. No, you just run it. Yeah, and it is good for the injectors. Yeah, but like a blend, I don't run it straight. It's better to blend it.
Yeah, there's some problem with trying to run 100%.
Yeah, doesn't like it.
I don't remember what it is, but yeah.
It can kind of get gunked up. I've heard, yeah.
Cool weather or something like that.
I think there's, I mean, like, I know with straight veggie, like, you have to put the heaters in and stuff. It's all like a scene. But the 50-50, or I even like, I'm like more like 25 bio, 75% diesel. But again, it's like, depends on the diesel motor and stuff. Like, when you get into like older Cummins and stuff, I mean, you can burn oil in them, you know, like they'll burn. I'd be scared to do it, especially with these, with like all the new, like the exhaust and stuff and the emissions. Like, yeah, that'd be my, like, I'd be more inclined to put biodiesel in older equipment, you know, again, always as a blend. Yeah, yeah, but that's who burns the most of it, is running our electricity, Elko. Yeah, 50%.
Oh wow.
Yeah, my buddy he ran the biodiesel plant, and he said, yeah, that's their main contract.
Oh.
Is the county. Yeah, while we're still burning diesel for electricity.
Yeah. Yeah.
That contract, I think it's up. I think we got like another 20 years of burning diesel.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, you guys welcome. Yeah.